Okay, so just a second. I'd like to call this April 3rd, 2023 meeting of the Concord Select Board to order. And our first order of business is to move to executive session. And so I'd like to ask the town clerk, the clerk of the Select Board to make a motion.
Okay, move to open the executive session under Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, to discuss threatened litigation regarding the town's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission, where meeting in an open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigating positions of the town, with open session to resume at approximately 6:30 p.m.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
I think it was just.
Oh, we actually have to take a roll call vote, and particularly because Linda is online.
You have to declare that.
Oh, yeah, and I so declare that. Actually, let's go ahead and have Linda, could you identify yourself online?
Linda Escobedo, member of the Select Board, unable to attend except for audio this evening.
Okay, thank you. And the rest of us are here in the room. So now we need a roll call vote.
Mr. Dane?
Aye.
Ms. Hartman?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
And myself, Ms. Ackerman. Aye.
And Linda, you need to get her vote.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Linda?
Ms. Escobedo, how do you vote?
Aye.
Great.
Okay. So now we're moving to executive session. So anyone from the public, we will be closing the room, and you can re-enter at the end of the executive session, which we hope to be approximately at 6:30. So we're returning to open session after our executive session. We do have one member on Zoom, so all votes will be via roll call this evening. And indeed, to start that process off, I'd like to get a motion for the consent agenda.
Okay, move to approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote.
Any?
Any edits or anything?
Yeah, I do have an edit, actually.
Okay,
Sorry. Page 6.
page 6 on the minutes.
Yeah, the paragraph that begins, I think it's the third paragraph down, begins Chair Johnson.
Chair Johnson.
Yeah,
What did you say this time?
last sentence, Chair Johnson suggested that the board present an amendment on the floor of town meeting and report its recommendations of the article then. And I think it was the commission, because the board can't actually make amendments. Wasn't that what you were suggesting?
Well, I was suggesting that we propose that there be an amendment. I don't know.
Then maybe
not.
that's a better way to say
Yeah.
it.
Okay,
Okay, great.
all right.
Thank you.
Anything else? Ready to? So with that, so
Okay, roll call vote. Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Mr. Dane,
Aye.
Ms. Hartman.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
aye,
Myself, Ms. Ackerman. Aye.
as amended. And then we do have a proclamation that we'd like to read for Ellen Garrison Day.
None.
Oh. Thank you. Proclamation honoring April 14th as Ellen Garrison Day. Whereas Ellen Garrison was born in Concord on April 14th, 1823, granddaughter of patriot of color Caesar Robbins, who served in the American Revolution and was most likely at the North Bridge on April 19th, 1775. And whereas Ellen was the daughter of formerly enslaved man Jack Garrison and her mother, Susan Garrison, who became a founding member of the Concord Female Anti-Slavery Society. And whereas Ellen was educated in the Concord Public Schools in Monument Square, and her activism began early, learning about racial discrimination. And whereas Ellen continued her mother's anti-slavery activism as a teacher in the Freedmen School during Reconstruction, and in her commitment demanding civil rights for all, signing petitions to make her voice heard, and practicing her activism on the streets of Concord at a Baptist church in Boston, and in the Freedmen Schools of Rhode Island, Maryland, North Carolina, and Kansas. And whereas Ellen lived a life dedicated to the struggle for civil rights until her passing in an anti-slavery community in Pasadena, California, where she is buried with anti-slavery activists. Now, therefore, we as the Select Board of the Town of Concord, Massachusetts, on behalf of Concord's employees, committees, community partners, and citizens, do hereby recognize April 14th, 2023 as Ellen Garrison Day, honoring this native daughter of Concord and her connection to those who fought for freedom. Proclaimed this third day of April, 2023.
Hear, hear.
Very good. Can I have
Okay.
a question?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Terry, thank you for that. Is there a select board member that will also read this at the April 14th event that we're having at, I believe it's at the Robbins House and here at the town?
Question.
Who would like to? I could.
I could.
Okay, if you'd like to, because I'll be speaking at the Holocaust Remembrance Day
Okay.
next week.
Then
So
I'll do
after
it. Is that okay?
Yeah, it'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
This goes back to Shannon.
Yep.
I guess I should have a
There's
copy.
the
then.
signed copy of the
Oh.
proclamation.
Give me one. Thank you.
Give this to Mary.
There is
Oh,
a reading copy.
My copy.
Okay.
By the way, I just want to mention that the Concord 250 Executive Committee is a co-sponsor of that event.
Okay,
Oh,
That's
great.
right. It's our first
Very good.
event, right?
It's a kickoff.
It's our first event, right?
Right. Okay.
Good.
All right. So we're ready for the town manager's report.
Okay, thank you and good evening. Referring to the report of March 31, 2023, I note that last week the governor signed legislation extending the temporary provisions pertaining to the open meetings law through March 31, 2025, in case anybody hadn't heard that. We did have a community update meeting on 2229 Main Street last week. We had several residents in attendance and there was a site walk as well. The EPA reviewed the site history, the 2015 record of decision, and the contractor, the EPA site cleanup contractor, reported out on the last 18 months worth of progress on that particular project. April is National Poetry Month, and there is some information from the Concord Free Public Library in the report about ways that the month will be celebrated. An announcement that the bike share will be returning for 2023 this April, but we are partnering this time with the town of Acton to have a regional bike share, which will be known as the Minuteman Bike Share. Bikes from any station between the two towns will be able to be picked up and dropped off at any of the locations along the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. Last week, the planning board had its public hearing to talk about Articles 33, 34, and 35. That was the last public hearing in preparation for the annual town meeting. A note that the visitor center is now back on its 7-day per week operation beginning April 1st. Which was this past weekend. Also, this was news to me. Our Natural Resources Director, Delia Kay, along with CLCT Chair Polly Reeve and the former Sudbury Valley Trustees Director, Krista Collins, and Rich Feely of the Housing Foundation, presented the Assabet River Bluff Acquisition Project to the Massachusetts Land Conservation Conference. I thought that was a nice note that they were able to talk about the partnership between all of the groups and how they came together to meet mutual objectives in town. So that was nice for that project to be honored. There's a note in here that broadband has been approved to participate in the Affordable Connectivity Program, which allows for a monthly cost reduction for qualifying customers of $30 per month. We have a number of new employees that I wanted to mention. There is a note in here about our new GIS analyst, Heather Bomick. Heather previously worked as a GIS analyst for the Cape Cod Commission for MassDOT and with the consulting firm CDM Smith. Also, Megan Zamuto, our deputy town manager, started today. Megan comes to us from the town of Maynard, where she held a similar position. Mimi Graney, our Economic Vitality Manager, also started today. Mimi comes to us from the city of Chelsea. And first thing this morning, interim police chief Tom Mulcahy was sworn in as the town's next police chief. So we had a nice reception for him. He wanted to have something private. We're hoping he'll do something a little more public in a couple of weeks or so. I'm sure there are many community. Yes. He really was very adamant that he wanted to have something private. His family was here and some members of the department. So that was a very nice event that we had this morning.
Wow, that's
And
quite
that is it. I think
surge of new government.
it was a big day. I think our two new employees were really excited because we had coffee and donuts. I think they think this is how we start every week off. But, I let them know.
Good idea.
Where these donuts come from?
Henry had the very last of the donuts.
Oh, there's one left.
There's one left.
Jelly donut looks
You
like.
do not start every week that way, but it was a lot this morning going on. So I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, question.
I have a comment and a question about the bike share. So this sounds like a really good idea, and it sounds like almost like a good pilot for the 250th. That if it works, if we can collect some data, then because we're really a lot of us thinking about how to transport people into Concord during the 250th. Now, if we have bike shares from all the surrounding towns or as many as possible, that might help a lot. So I think it's a great idea and want to get some data if we have it.
Yeah, sure. I should have also mentioned that on a regular basis, Megan will be joining us at this meeting, probably not every meeting, but maybe every other meeting,
Great.
just so you can become more acquainted with her and she with you.
Great.
Okay. And her portfolio is sort of the operations. So
her
describe.
Her first assignment will be to be working with Marcia Rasmussen in her last couple of months here with the town. She's going to be soaking in as much as she can about that operation. She will be serving as the interim director of planning and land management while we do an analysis to make sure or to look at how we might want to run that part of our operation going forward. Marcia's been here for a very long time. And it was actually even Marcia's suggestion that now would be a great time to take a look at that to make sure we're set up for success.
Okay. Other questions for the town manager? Okay. My only comment is that for the chair's remarks is that I attended an event last night at the high school, speech by a author, Bill McKibben, author of 20 books. And I don't know if any of the others of you were able to catch that, but I found it quite compelling. And he grew up in Lexington, so his experience, is quite locally relevant and had some very specific recommendations for the people of Concord. So, and I think the most memorable one is that Concord is a very comfortable place, but we need to move outside of our comfort zone. So I won't go into it much more, but I thought that it was quite a great event and put on, with the high school, at the high school, but we're also working with the students there.
Who sponsored it? The high school?
Yeah, let's see. It was, First Parish, but there's also a number of other organizations who are affiliated with it.
Great.
Okay, so let's now move to our 6:45 item, and indeed it is 6:45. The Concord Independent Battery, who should appreciate that we're on time because that's part of what they do is be on time. So please step up if you're representing the battery, and we'll look at our 2023 approvals.
Thank you. And these are three more that were not in the package.
My goodness, we gave you 5 minutes on the
Oh, boy.
agenda. That's
We're
pretty
along.
tight. We'll see.
Okay,
The amount of time that's spent is always the opposite of the importance of
I guess.
what's being.
Yeah.
first of all, just introduce myself. I'm Phil Kenny. I'm actually the president of the Concord Independent Battery, and
I'm Peter Mayette. I'm the captain.
Okay.
John Thompson, I'm the secretary.
Okay.
okay. So we represent kind of the executive leadership of the battery, but we put these packages together every year has been requested by the town for
Since the 70s. Yeah.
umpty years. And we don't mind doing it because obviously it creates a very straightforward discipline as far as what we do and how we do it, and how we monitor what gets done and all that. So I sent a letter to Carrie through Shannon, right, that addressed those issues, address the schedule for the year. But what I shared with you was the master training records that we have.
Yep.
The certificates of liability for all the insurance, naming the town of Concord as a certificate holder of that, and as well as with the trustees of reservations, because we use the old Mansfield and they're very, very accommodating for us. So we make sure we cover that. And again, anytime we have additional requirements or requests that come from other elements of the state or whatever, like, and this is the most common one, we do get requests from USS Constitution, Old Ironsides. We go to Fort Independence, I think for the last 5 years, so whatever, something like that.
Mhm.
And we join in there with elements of the Mass National Guard. But, we represent town of Concord and we represent the elements of the fight for independence. And that's what they want us to do, right? And it's kind of a very interesting event to see the USS Constitution come in and then turn in front of us. They fire, we respond and it's a
Wow.
nice little deal. Mhm.
I have not seen that. That
It
sounds
is.
like it would be great.
It is.
You're more than welcome anytime we go in.
Yeah.
So,
Is it on the 4th of July?
No, I mean, I think last year we did like the 9th of June or something like that, right? It was something like that. And it was, last year was to a recognition of the area's Vietnam vets, right? And a year before we did they did an event to honor the local Medal of Honor winners, which was appropriate given Tom Hudner, who was also a representative of the town, but a member of the battery, which was greatly appreciated. And he was, he had passed, and we went in and did, we fired at his.
when his ship came into port, we did that as well.
Yeah, when the ship was commissioned, we did that. So we try a little bit, but not a lot, because we're a 110% volunteer organization. Mhm. And
Well, you're speaking to
Yeah,
another.
really. We know what that's like.
I get it. But, we do depend on membership and on donations and all that. We do have a very strong, what I call association, over 125 associate members and about 32 active members right now. And as a result of that, we're able to sustain our ability to go out and hire horses and, march in the parades and do all the things we do. But it requires due diligence to make sure we're doing the right things.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're in coordination with the public ceremonies committees. We do work with the fire department and have in the past, and the state fire marshals as far as all of the firing permits and the safety aspects of what we do. We actually had 2 of those guys come over to see us a couple of years ago. And they came to one of our practices and, watched the whole routine and all that. And frankly said, you guys are good.
Well, you probably had something to teach them. I mean, you have a lot more experience with these kind of.
I'm not going to comment.
Okay. Yeah, these kind of
But
weapons.
the point being is we follow our rules, and that's why I wanted to make that right. We've submitted everything through Shannon and all the requirements associated with just talking to the boroscope exam and all that type of stuff. And so all those elements are in place. And really the intent of us being here today is to gain your permission to go ahead and execute our activities for 2023. And then, use that as a baseline to go forward. So that's the intent of our presence today.
Okay. Questions from the board?
We look forward to seeing your first job of the year on Saturday at 1:00.
That's correct.
Yes.
That's
Good.
right. So,
So we actually are going to be at the old manse on Saturday morning because we always do what we call a quote unquote test fire, right? Where we walk through the routines, but we actually use live rounds is the only time. No, and there it's not a live round, it's blank, right?
Mhm.
That type of stuff. But it's a way for us to kind of make sure we're all in tune and the leadership is there. So we wanted that. So we start off with that. We actually go back to the gun house, have a sandwich lunch, and then get down to Merriam's Corner for that exercise. And then we're off, for the exercises for the year.
I really like peeking into the windows of the gun house. I just think, it's such a unique
You should
space.
come in sometime. I mean, we have to clean it up a little bit, right?
Yeah,
But
it has a lot of interesting stuff in it. It's,
yeah, there is.
yeah.
The story behind that is that was all funds that were contributed, and it cost $16,500 to build that in 1960.
Uh-huh.
And the last few elements were with some significant contributions to get over the finish line, right? But yeah, and it's been there fine. We had to replace the roof and the doors. But we hope it's there for another 100
Well, we have
years.
the chair of the Board of Assessors here today.
Oh,
so-
okay.
So I have to say also just acknowledging kind of what you had said when you started up that, this at first, it seems like such a bureaucratic mess of paperwork that you have to do every year. But now, and the first time I saw it, I said, what is this? But the more I heard first about the history, but then secondly about having witnessed it year after year, I do agree that it gives you a rhythm. That you can do the trainings and and get your schedule in order and everything lines right up.
Right,
It seems
right,
like so.
And as I suggested in the letter to the town manager, we may not hear of a request to go like to the OSS Constitution. We may not get that till the middle of June.
Yeah.
But we'll come back to the board and say, can we have permissions to remove the guns?
to get them out of town.
Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, the town owns the guns.
Yeah.
The other things that we need to come on quickly is a funeral.
Yes.
Prior to funeral, it's just. a
Joe
few
Lennox
days.
last December, we did we took out the funeral beer, took a gun off the case on, put the funeral beer on that, and then put the casket on that,
Wow.
just like they do down in DC,
Arlington National Cemetery.
right? We did that for Tom Hunter, Otis Whitney, a number of people in town, but very specific and very the requests don't come, but when they do come, it's immediate type of stuff. You get like 2 days to
Yeah.
react. So we do come to the town for ask permission on that type of stuff. Beyond that, that's kind of what we do.
Okay. Well, thanks very much. It's a unique capability that we have.
I would like to add, and a little bit in the context of the 250th, we're fully engaged with those folks going forward because we know that'll be a big event. Having participated in the 200th, and but yes, I wrote about that one, but it gets to be quite the event, and it's the coordination aspects of it are significant.
Do you expect a surge in membership?
Well,
We hope so.
I'll tell you, one thing I did want to mention, I forgot to bring them, but if you see the magazine called Discover Concord, it's a really nice magazine, beautiful. We have an article in there this year,
Okay.
and we wrote that up, and at the very end of it, you'll see exactly what the point is. And I intend to get more, for lack of a better term, PR out there saying, hey, we're there. It's interesting how people join. We had one, it's a gentleman from Carlisle, joined, and he said, he was a doctor at Mass General. And he said, I drove by this building for the last 35 years, and I always wondered what was in that building. So we were out practicing one time, and he stopped, and he joined.
There it is.
Awesome. So we joined, and we do get people that are interested in the history aspects of it, right? and it's good, but we are absolutely, we're on camera, we're absolutely open up for membership.
All right.
Especially
ConcordBattery.org.
especially somebody owns a horse.
So especially.
That's the hardest part. Getting the horses is the hardest part of
Which I would
running this
also
now.
mention that we have a great relationship with Vero Farms and the riding stables at Barrel. We do not only do the gun guys practice, but the horse guys practice.
Yeah.
Right. And it's important because you're on the road in a parade and you got to know what you're doing.
Okay.
Well,
Thank
thank you
you.
for
Thank you very
everything you're
much.
doing.
Appreciate it. Hope to see you on the 19th or the 17th, right?
Or even.
We
the
have to
8th.
take our
We have
vote
to vote.
first.
We have to vote, right?
Right,
Yes, we do.
Don't say
So,
thanks.
can I ask
Get
the clerk
carried
for a
away.
motion?
right.
Okay.
So thank you for everything that you do. Very professional.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. Move to approve the application, move to approve the 2023 requests by the Concord Independent Battery as included in the select board meeting packet.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote.
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Mr. Dane,
Aye.
Ms. Hartman,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
and myself, Ms. Ackerman, aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, so now we have our 650 item, the application for a change of manager at Concord Market. And so do we have the applicant? All right, step right up, sir.
Thank you. You goodbye. Okay. My name is Jim White. I am here representing Concord Market and Steve Collins, who is the person who will be hopefully this the new manager for the market.
Yeah.
And that's why we're here. This paperwork. Steve has been with us for a little over 2 years now. So
The green light's got to be on. There we go.
You want me to go through the whole thing or should I pick up wherever?
We've got it. Yeah.
And he's now handling the food at the market as well. So I think it's a straightforward application. We'll see if we have questions.
Any questions from the board? Yeah, the paperwork seemed to be in order to me.
Yeah.
Nice operation you got down there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Look forward to more of it. All right, so can we get a motion?
Move to approve the application for a change of manager for Concord Market at 77 Lowell Road as included in the select board meeting packet.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote.
Okay, Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Mr. Dane,
Aye.
Ms. Hartman,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
and myself, Ms. Ackerman, aye.
Thank you all very
Thank
much.
you very much.
Okay.
Now
Nice
get out of here before we change our mind.
All right. So now we have a joint meeting with the Board of Assessors to discuss the residential exemption and review clause 41C and a half.
Really? Is this a joint meeting or presentation?
Well,
I don't think it's.
it does say a joint meeting. Do you have a quorum? No, so it's not a joint meeting. It's just
Okay.
a presentation by the chair of the board and
Yes, I think we declared a joint meeting just to be on the safe side.
so,
Okay.
so, I just wanted to start by saying,
I'll take one of those.
We have a
Oh,
color
yes.
one.
oh, yeah,
I will too then.
that reviewing the material in the packet,
Yeah, free.
I thought it was just outstanding.
Yes.
I thought it was one of the finest presentations I've gotten as a select board member for making an important decision. Just because the scenarios that were shown, the alternatives, it was very thorough. And I do hope that these materials will be available, to the public in some form. I mean, I realize that not everybody's going to want to drill into the details as deeply as this, but it's definitely worth people's time to take a look. So whoever did this, I definitely give them kudos. So take us through it, Mr. Carr.
So if you actually. Sure. Yes, thank you. Okay, so my name is David Carr, Chair of the Board of Assessors. My address too, or
Go right ahead. Yeah.
82 Lossbrook Road. So I'd like to start out with just giving a kind of an overview of the entire procedure. I'd like to, I studied both the demographics of the town of Concord and by looking at the distributions of property values among the residential properties. Well, then we'll look at the alternatives to these existing policies and then residential exemption in depth and clause 41C.5 in depth. So next slide. So for demographics, these are some surprising numbers in here. 18,000 people, not surprising. 6,000 households, not surprising. 74.6% homeowners, a little lower than I expected.
Mm-hmm.
And 16% of household seniors living alone, maybe a bit surprising, maybe not. 42% have income below 75,000. That's, I think, pretty significant. Now, these numbers, some of them are quite old. I did not have access to 2023 or even 2022 numbers in many cases, but you can kind of get at least a sense of the magnitude of the issue from looking at these. Things haven't changed that much in the past few years.
Yeah.
And I think actually one of the sites that I looked at actually projected senior population to grow from 20% to 30% by 2030.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think these are just going to get more.
It's going to be more. Yes.
Okay. So we currently have several mechanisms for shifting the property tax burden. This is what we're talking about, shifting the burden. We currently have a senior means tested exemption. We have several statutory clauses, 41C, et cetera. We have not done, but could do a split rate, which I'm not going to talk about because we do this every year and nobody's asking about it.
Right. And Shannon, could you do the next slide, please? Because I think you're speaking.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I skip a slide?
You did.
I did skip a slide. I'm sorry. Yes. Let's go back. Let's go back one slide. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes. I did promise that I would say something about property values. So we have the median house at $1,169,500. I took a complete list of all single-family resident homes in town, single-family homes, and found that, well, approximately 33% were under $1 million, approximately 66% under 1.4 million. And if you go from the range of 700,000 to 2.5 million, you've got 90% of everybody. So that's a pretty good range to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Now we do have a few that are much higher. We do have a few that are lower, but this really, I think, captures pretty much the town.
Yeah.
Okay, now we can go to the next slide. So I will skip the currently implemented since I talked about that already, and the split rate since we don't want to hear about that. We've got the residential exemption and clause 41C.5. So let's go straight into the residential exemption. Next slide, please. So this exemption is available for use in any city or town in Massachusetts. It requires the select board to decide each year whether they want the exemption. And if they choose the exemption, they need to choose a percentage of value to exempt. In order to qualify the exemption, a residential parcel merely needs to be occupied by the homeowner as of a certain date. And it's in that fiscal year. And the basic effect of it is it will increase the residential tax rate while exempting part of the property values from from all residents, all homeowner residents. Yes. Right. So you're shifting the tax from the exempt portion of everybody's properties who qualify onto their non-exempt portion and the entire value of anybody who doesn't qualify. That's the shift. Next slide, please. So there are currently 17 towns with an exemption, residential exemption, and there are 3 towns that used to have it but have discontinued it since.
Yeah, and I see a member of the public is asking to clarify that there are perhaps others that have, since this data, approved this.
Well, it's possible, but I have checked. Their DOR has a website where you can look up the latest figures. If they have done it since,
We will have public comment at the end of
yes.
this.
And now I would note that Mashpee and Oak Bluffs are new.
Yeah.
They were not in the list that any of the published lists that you might have seen in the city or town from the DOR or so forth.
Okay.
They're only listed in the online database and the DOR, as far as I can tell, but they do have it.
And I mean, is it fairly safe to say that the intent of the residential exemption as it was drafted was to ensure that in towns where there is a significant either a transient rental population like the student population or second homes of vacationers, that those who were year-round, permanent residents that wanted to own their own homes, weren't paying excessive taxes. And so the idea there was to encourage, local home ownership by year-round residents in places that had a lot of, offsite landlords and rental properties. Is that a reasonable
Yes, I think
assumption of the intent?
I
And
think
that
if you-
if Concord
yeah.
were to adopt this, it would be to using this in a totally different way than intended, which is to actually shift the tax burden to, higher value properties. Because not virtually all the property, as you've shown, that it's actually only 75%, but still it's a very large percentage of the property is already owner occupied principal residence.
That's an excellent example of a strongly leading question.
Just checking.
But that doesn't,
Well,
excuse me.
I would say that as far as I can tell, if you look at the people who have the exemption nowadays,
Yeah.
it seems that they likely all fall into the categories you've described.
What about Waltham and Chelsea?
Waltham,
Chelsea.
I know there's a lot. I know there's considerable. I've rented in Waltham before, so I know they have some rentals,
A lot
but I
of
don't know how much.
Property.
And they do have they do have some commercial. They do have I mean the Brandeis students are all living off campus.
Yeah,
So
they have a
they've got-
significant,
yeah.
like Brandeis and
But I can ask another leading question. And that is, just because something was adopted for one purpose doesn't mean that it can't be used for a different purpose if it fits, just like virtually all pharmaceuticals are used off-label. And so there is an opportunity to use something that will solve a problem, even if that was not the original intention.
I agree. with
Also,
that.
yes, also well said, and that's why we that's why we didn't stop with this slide.
Yeah, so let's go to the next. slide.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, next slide. So here's an example. This is similar to the numbers we've given you before, I believe. This is on the assumption that 95% of the single family homes and condos are owner occupied. That would mean that all the renters are basically in apartments, and then the remaining 5% of those other properties. In this case, if we wanted to get at least $1,000 of shift away from the median value home, you would need to set the exemption amount at approximately 30%. So I took 30% and worked those numbers, and these are the values I come up with. The tax rate goes up by 36.4%. It's to $17.68.
That's just the residential rate. It doesn't affect the commercial.
That's right. The commercial, none of this affects the commercial rate.
Okay.
And that is actually why, well, that's partly why it goes up so much, but yes, the commercial rate is not affected at all. And I very carefully excluded all commercial property when doing these numbers. But it is
one
not-
of the things to keep in mind with these examples is that we're showing either a percent increase or decrease, but that's based upon the same, base total tax.
Yeah.
Whereas what this would typically happen, it would be implemented in conjunction with a tax year change, right? Where we would have a higher
Right.
total levy for the next year that we'd have to capture.
Yeah.
So even if the net effect is minus 6.7%, let's say on a median home, that once you apply the increase, the annual increase, they would likely see some increase because this 1,000 is just to recover the initial loan rate.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have a 5-6%. I'm just guessing where we will end up next year, but 5-6% increase on top of that. So I'm just saying, if you're in this 2.5 million, you'd be seeing, even if you applied and you get the residential exemption, you'd be seeing a 20% increase in your taxes.
In your bill, yes.
In your bill. Yeah.
But I have a question about this. First of all, the examples are terrific. That really helped me understand it. So the first assumption is 95% of single family homes and condos are owner occupied. And how is that different from slide 3, where you said the demographics are that 74.6% of Concord are homeowners?
Yeah, we will actually get, I actually, that's why there's an example too.
Yeah. Okay.
On the next slide.
Okay, so
But maybe we should go on to that one.
so these,
Except for the,
I have a
go
question.
ahead, Mary.
so just to clarify, these are just theoretical examples.
Yes.
That's it? Okay.
Right.
Okay.
These, we would have, before we would do any of this, we would have to get much better numbers than I could get on my own just by looking on websites.
Yeah, but these are just hypothetical. Okay, I get it.
Mary?
One of the things that this slide highlighted for me was the impact to people who are not qualified for the exemption, even though, well, that aren't qualified. What assumption did you make as far as what percent would qualify or not qualify? And I'm saying, I guess not qualified because they haven't lived at that address. Is that how they would disqualify themselves?
Well, they would have to actually.
I thought that was the only.
It's if you actually live in a house you own,
Yeah.
you don't have to, you might have 1 year, I'm not sure, but it's very easy to qualify. Maybe in the year you bought it, you might not qualify for that partial year, but by the next year, I think you would.
So this not qualified columns that you have here.
This is mainly, it's absentee owners, and rentals.
Yeah. So that's another question for me. Let's assume you
Yeah.
own a 10-unit apartment complex. Okay. And that 10-unit apartment complex is assessed at $4 million. All right. So are you treated as if you've got a $4 million? So your taxes would go up 40%.
But isn't that commercial?
Assuming there's a.
No, it is
There would be-
residential. If they're rental
Well, it looks
apartments,
like
they
it's
are
6.4 across the board.
they are
but
in the
then,
residential.
You know, given about a
portion.
5% increase or something, it's going to be over 40% by the time
But
it's all
keep
said and
in
done.
mind, there are some other issues there. For instance, real estate taxes are deductible to owners of rental properties, whereas they are no longer, except at least over $10,000 are not deductible
Right.
to the owners of residential property. Secondly, the actual value per unit in that $4 million building is going to be obviously far less. And so that even if it was taxed at the higher rate, it would not increase the tax on it that much. And I think at the point we've made in the past that rents are not determined by the landlord's cost, they are determined by the market. That is, you rent rental property by what people are willing or able to pay to live in it, rather than what it costs the landlord to own it. And on top of that, I believe in Massachusetts, renters get a 50% deduction on their rent from their taxes. There is a rental
I think
deduction.
there's a up to $2,000.
Yeah. So there are many other benefits that come, so that a lot, we have to consider that, but there are a lot of, the impact on renters may be exaggerated as being an argument against adopting this.
Well, just in that hypothetical example I gave, though, if you have the 10-unit apartment complex that assessed at 4 million, then you'd be looking at about $18,000 increase in taxes for your building that year. So, it'd be $1,800 per unit of increased taxes that you could perhaps recover some through the, tax deduction, but it's ending up going to add, let's say, $150. It's going to either take $150 out of the margin per
Right,
month
right.
for that unit, or be added $150 a month per unit,
Or some combination.
something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Just to get a sense of order of magnitude of the impact. Now, this is assuming, though, this is the extreme case. You're
It's-
assuming,
Right.
first of all, a higher percentage of owner occupied homes than
Right.
we have.
Right.
Yeah.
Second of all, that
Lot
everybody on year one says, yes, I'm in,
Right.
and they all qualify.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a rather extreme example
Okay.
because
Yeah.
mainly because of the first point that I don't think,
We don't have
given that
in it.
74.6%
Yeah.
from the first slide, I don't think that we have 95%.
Right.
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 So that's why we get to next slide,
5%.
Well,
the 85%, which again is a it's a very rough estimate. I came up with this by taking 74% of the condos and single family homes and saying, okay, well, those are the ones that are, how many households does that make?
Mhm.
And subtract and okay, how
Make
many
that add up
more?
to 70.
Yeah, how much percentage of those properties would this add up to? And it came out to
Okay,
about 85%.
that's still my question, then. I'm not following that.
Yeah.
What's the difference between the 74% and this
Well,
85?
the 74% includes everyone, all those apartment complexes, which we do have a considerable amount of.
So you first have to take the whole pie and say what percentage of housing is private housing, owned housing versus rental. And then of the owned housing, how much of that would be owner occupied? And that's how he's getting this 85% of
74.6%.
of the owned housing is owner occupied housing. Is that the idea?
Yes. So I think the vast majority of the
That is
renters will be in apartments,
Percent of the total housing.
and the remainder in the 15% of
Yeah, it's a percent of a
type.
percent. to
Right.
Get you to
Of the-
this.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is, would a cooperative as opposed to a condominium be treated as an owned property? Or would it be rental property because you have a lease from the corporation that owns it, but you own stock in the corporation?
Yeah, like Newbury Court, I think would be an example of something like
Yeah,
that.
I don't know if I'm prepared to give
Well,
a
but it's
definitive
a-
answer to that one, but I do recall that there are special considerations for cooperatives, which I think, I know I'm not going to swear to this, but I think that they support your point that those would be owners.
Okay. I mean, I don't even know how they pay their taxes, whether it's all thrown into a bucket and it gets paid that way or,
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay. Another bridge to come to later. It's a detail.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so-
it's a less extreme.
So it's
Yeah.
considerably less extreme. We're looking at 21.3% on the non-qualified versus 36.4. And again, the same effects for the median value qualified, slightly less severe effects for those who are in the very low or very high ends. And I think we can go on to the next slide. So this was just seemed like a good example. We've another town that has recently adopted this, I believe 2 years ago. Now they estimated they had a little over 4,600 parcels. They thought they were going to get 1,350 who qualified. So the first year they set their rate at 4%. They got 683 parcels, which is just about half of just a little over
Because
half.
those are the only people who filled out the application. So qualified
Yeah.
means all the other stuff, plus you have to fill out the application, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It could also mean that they misestimated
Yeah.
who was qualified. But I think if we look at the second year's figures,
Cool. Can we get to
that-
that issue later? Because I don't want to interrupt this, but there was something to be discussed there.
yeah. So and you notice they have a very low property tax rate.
Yeah,
give or
how'd they
take.
pull that off?
High
value.
High value, but
I know.
really? I mean, compared to Concord?
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Just
Well,
Interesting.
they also-
They probably have very few public services.
They also have-
They don't, their number of
Schools, right?
students in the school.
yeah, right.
probably very, very low. I
They-
expect.
I talked to the treasurer in Nantucket. She told me a couple of years ago that the average year-round resident gets actually a check from the town every year instead of a tax bill.
Wow, that's great.
All right. So, and so we can also imagine that fewer people applied because it just almost wasn't worth it with only a 4%.
That is also quite
But
possible.
as the percentage goes up, you get higher
Mhm.
compliance.
Yes, and they did get another 8% of people coming in,
Right.
8% the original estimate. Now this
Point
may
increase,
be getting
yeah.
closer to their actual number.
Right, because more people are hearing about it.
And it's worth more.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, but there was also the other issue that you raised, I think, which gives this impetus to do it gradually, which is
Mhm.
that the overlay fund is what you use to put and take.
Yeah. You're
Right.
jumping ahead to the next slide. I think.
Yeah.
Oh,
but I
actually,
mean,
a
that
couple
that
slides,
sort of
but yes.
explains why this
Yeah.
strategy.
Right, right. No, it is a strategy. I think
through
it's a
right now.
strategy I've seen in the,
Sorry, if you're on Zoom, please mute. Thank you.
yeah, there is actually, and you can find this online too. I could dig this up. The Oak Bluffs assessors did write a report to their select board recommending that they start slow.
Mhm.
But we'll get to that in a minute. Next slide. Yes, the residential exemption, there's the application form.
I have a
It's
question about
not
this.
that onerous, I think.
Why are they do you know why they're asking for the, your federal tax return with income information since this isn't?
Oh, no, actually, I thought that they actually said that you should blank out social security numbers, the income numbers and so forth, that they don't want that information.
You're right.
Then why do they
That's
want the
right.
ten
Because
they-
you
forty?
they-
put that
because-
as your address on
Right.
your tax.
It's the
Because-
proof of your address.
You have told the IRS that this is your address.
Very good.
And you're not going to tell the IRS that you have some other address.
Exactly.
So
Good.
my
Yeah.
question on that subject is, if we have the available data, can people be automatically qualified based on, say, running the voting list against the tax records, or getting from the State Department of Revenue a list of the addresses that are used on tax returns in your town and just running them against the tax rolls so that the great majority of people could be automatically qualified using available and reliable data?
That would be a question for the Department of Revenue.
But let's-
What I've read online is that we're not allowed to use a hard and fast rule.
But you
might-
might have a process for exceptions.
Yeah, then and I don't actually know, when they say you can't use a hard and fast rule, does that mean you can't ask them for the rolls of who filed? Can you ask the IRS? Would they give you the information? I'm not sure.
But the State Department of Revenue might,
Yeah.
because this is one of their issues, isn't it? But I mean, there may be ways to not only make it easy for people to qualify, but also take a lot of the burden off the Board of Assessors in dealing with 6,000
Yes.
applications.
We might want to ask the Oak Bluffs assessors why they didn't do that.
Okay, well, we can go on, I think.
Okay, next slide shows sample tax bill.
I got one of these today.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
It didn't show the.
It didn't.
Minus 90,000. No. I like this one better. Well, no, I don't. Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
So, yeah, so this one is, you would get the tax bill. It would show what your residential exemption was and what your total taxable value was after the exemption. And then, of course, the usual tax information on the right.
Yep.
Okay, I think we can go on to the next slide. Processing an application. Now, I think processing, if we have to do it by the same method as Oak Bluffs did, it wouldn't be terribly onerous on the staff to process, as I believe, since most people have 1040s, they can simply attach a page with the personal information blanked out with the necessary information there and just check it off and you're done.
well, that is one of the big questions, why we haven't done this in the past. It was claimed that the assessor's office would be overwhelmed with so much extra work. So how, besides The 1040,
Well,
like,
there would,
yeah.
Well,
there
that
would,
1040
there would
is
be,
new,
there
right.
would be several thousand of these applications to do.
Right.
And those that had trusts, we would still, according to what I've read, we would still have to go through the trust documents to check off all the,
Yeah.
have they done this? Have they done
Yeah,
this?
they
Have they
are.
done this? Did the lawyers not mess it up?
I've had to do that for
Yeah.
property transfer
Mhm.
tax in Martha's Vineyard. And it's grueling.
Yes.
So how much, do you have an estimate of, would you need to hire more staff, for example? I mean, how onerous would this be?
I would assume that we would need to hire more staff. I don't know how many. We do need, if we take the example of reval here, we need to hire more staff for that. We need to actually have, quite a few, contractors come in.
Right. It would be
I
a
would
temporary
imagine,
surge.
I would imagine it wouldn't be as many as the number of contractors we need for a full reval. Because then first they'd be temporary, they'd only be for this, and they wouldn't have to actually visit every home, which is what the contractors of reval have to do.
Yeah.
So it would, I don't think it would be the same magnitude.
So is the first year the worst, or like, once you go through the trust, do you have to go through that same trust every year
No,
again?
I think
Okay.
once you have
Oh,
once you
good.
have vetted a trust, I believe, unless they change the trust, which
Yeah,
would
yeah.
which would show up as a change in ownership.
Yeah, but that's different. If
Yeah.
it's the same
And
document.
most of the trusts that own residential real estate are not really trusts at all.
Yeah.
Technically, they are just title holding entities.
Yeah, so I think that we would probably be able to, and I have been told, I'll put it this way, for towns that have this, some of them may do it every year, but some towns simply let you in, and once you're in, you're in.
Oh.
Some towns will only review your case once every 5 years.
Mhm.
It's
It's like
varies.
the $500 income requirement in chapter 61. How often does that get checked?
Every
Yes, that one gets,
Every year.
that one we check assiduously.
Right.
But this one we wouldn't need to check on that carefully.
So this last sentence on the slide about when people can apply.
Yes.
This, let me make sure if I interpret this correctly. This means that when you set the tax rate, you're not going to know how much you need to absorb because of the exemptions.
That is exactly
How many are
correct.
qualified and applied. So you're going to have to use the overlay account to make up any shortfall, or you might actually be able to add to the overlay account.
That's right.
Right.
Well, he's got some examples.
In the,
Okay,
so in the, so actually, and when in the Oak Bluffs numbers that I gave, I
Yeah.
believe those numbers are the numbers that they had before they set the tax rate. They were able to get that many applications in.
Okay, yeah, let's go.
Um, I may
No,
be mistaken about that, but I think when I read it, that they were as of a certain date, and then they set the tax rate. And then they had apparently some trickling of applications
Sure.
coming in afterwards, but apparently not too many because the next year's numbers weren't that much higher.
Right.
So you might be able to actually, you might be lucky and get everyone to
Or
turn their
most
things in on time, or at least close to everyone. So
Yep.
it's possible.
Thank you.
Okay. But it is an open, it is an open question. How many of them actually will do this? So residential, okay. So example number 3 on the next, thank you very much. Example number 3 was assuming we followed Oak Bluff's example and did 4% the first year.
Mhm.
Now, whether 4% actually would even be something we would want to do is another question, but assuming that we did want to do it, then our tax rate increase would only be 3.3%, pretty mild.
Mhm.
But of course, the benefits also would be fairly mild,
I'd say
$157.
too mild. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
4% seems too low. I
Right.
mean, unless there's just no way to do it with the overlay.
It
that's
is-
the only reason.
yeah. The only reason to do the 4% is if you're intending to go higher in future years, and you just
Mhm.
need to ease into the thing. You want to put it in by grades. I would expect Oak Bluff is probably going to, they went from 4% to 8%.
Yeah.
I expect they're going to go higher.
Right. So when you say ease into it, are you talking about politically, or are you talking about gearing up at the assessor's office?
I'm talking about
overlay.
mainly financially. for the town's finances. And we'll get to this, actually, if we go to the next
Yeah,
slide,
let-
I'll
you mean for
I'll
the
show
overlay.
exactly what we're talking
It's
about.
the overlay.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we need to do is we need to make sure, first of all, we don't want to collect more than a 2.5% increase on our taxes. And we don't want to go over our levy limit by accident. And we likewise don't want to exhaust our overlay account between this and the other
Right.
things that might hit it.
Mhm.
So if we're looking at the 30% exemption and we make just a few if we're just a little bit off, 1% of 1% error is 60 parcels for us, 1% of the properties.
Okay.
So if we're off by 60 parcels, that's, $370,000, which doesn't seem too bad. But when you add it up, 4 or 5% above or below, then it adds up. Not so bad with the 22% numbers, which I think are the more likely ones to use. I think I would have to talk to the finance director to see how well do those fall within. I mean, is that actually going to put us over the excess levy when we take other things into account, or are we going to be able to absorb that if we make this mistake?
I think we have like 4 or 5 million in the excess levy.
We have actually,
Well,
yes,
I
more
think
than
we're
5,
rating it,
according
though,
to my,
right?
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
50.
Cash. It's
No, we're taking the overlay.
Taking some out of the overlay.
750.
Right, but but I'm not talking about free cash.
I mean, this makes you
No, this
wonder,
is not free-
like,
this is overlay. The excess levy is not free cash.
Right.
right,
That's-
but I thought we were going to transfer from overlay.
750,000.
Yeah, but I believe the excess levy is due to be hit by some of the bonding. So
It's for the stabilization. The warrant article asks the town to take 750,000.
Exempt from
Yeah,
2.5.
And
Okay, maybe
it's-
Carrie can explain some of this.
not according to what I,
So it takes
So-
us down to 1.75 mil.
Well, no, I don't think, I let Carrie answer this.
No,
I'm having a little trouble following where we are right now, but so the excess levy capacity is shown here, the $5.3
Right.
million. I'm not really sure how we eat into it because of this, but I'm going to listen to this further. But the debt service on the middle
No.
school building is exempt.
No,
No,
he's
no, we're talking about
we
the
need a
overlay
buffer
account.
from the overlay account to handle any deviations
We're not
from
talking about
the
the excess.
expected
Right.
redemptions under this.
Yeah.
We're talking about the overlay account, not the limit.
Right.
level.
So we're just saying
So
that
yeah.
while we felt like a $2.5 million overlay account was excessive for your normal, kinds of
Oh,
handling.
right. Yes.
And we have 750 of that in
But
an
then when you get
article
in something like
to the
this, where the
stabilization.
overlay is
500.
used as
But
the funding mechanism in
Right.
some sense, when you're off, then
Right.
it's the
Right.
buffer.
Yeah.
Then 2.5 starts to look a little bit more like, well, we probably might need it.
But when we set the tax rate, we identify what we're going to have for overlay. And once the tax rate is set, we can't increase that. So I guess that's where I was having trouble. If we're off.
Well, that's
how it
precisely
gets
the problem.
funded.
We don't know what the value of the town is at the time when we set it. So if we underestimate the value, then because there are actually more people exempt than we thought, then we don't collect the levy that we meant to collect and has to come off the overlay.
But didn't you have the solution to have a deadline for application prior to setting the tax
No,
rate?
Cannot do
Can't do that.
And I
It's state
cannot do
law.
Cannot do that. The law that we
So-
must accept
We
exemption
can try
applications
to
up until
encourage
3
people to
months
get their
after.
apps in.
Yeah.
And that's what we could do.
So are we at risk of not having enough in our overlay to cover? Is that what the
In the 30% case, there could be
Yeah.
those circumstances.
Or if you're you have an error of more than 20%.
Yeah.
But neither of those seems likely.
We could increase the overlay rather than taking the money out of it. That would be another way to handle this. Of course, that's going to bump up
Well, that's
bump up the
thing.
base
We're
tax
really
rate as
counting
well.
on some of that overlay to do something else.
we are?
So it's a very, we're navigating between very tight.
And you can mitigate it if you have smaller percentages. So to start.
That's where that's I think where the
So,
4%.
I'm looking at like,
comes
well,
from.
if you started with like a 10%,
Right,
that might be a kind of
right. And then
So in the
you
water?
get a
Yeah.
feel for it. And now you know if you can handle it at 20%. Right.
yeah. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay. All right. So I also found a lengthy report by an ad hoc committee that the Lexington Select Board authorized a few years ago from April 2019. It was an examination of residential property tax exemption for the town of Lexington, Massachusetts. Now, of course, it was Lexington specific, but they brought in economic experts and
They're all over the place in Lexington. You can find economic experts.
Yeah.
Buying groceries next to you.
yeah, it sounded like quite a blue ribbon panel.
Yeah.
And they did some extensive modeling.
Okay.
So the results were, and they also talked to real estate professionals and so forth, a wide variety of people. And they didn't expect much impact on the outmigration, demand for the higher priced homes, et cetera, developers, which is all right. I don't think we're really expecting to affect that much. People move out for reasons.
Yeah.
And people move in for reasons, and people sell their homes to developers, and that happens. They mentioned that there was some incentive to convert rental units into owner-occupied units. You could, sell your rental house to an owner, or you could convert your.
Well, if you went all in, it certainly would be a big difference. Yeah.
You could convert an apartment complex into condos or a cooperative.
Okay.
And the economists looked at a phenomenon that they called capitalization, which is now that your expenses for this particular property are less because your tax bill has been reduced, the property is more attractive to a buyer and they're willing to pay more. So your value goes up.
Yeah.
But you know what? You know what shows that is unlikely to happen? I expected when they changed the federal tax law, which made real estate taxes over $10,000 non-deductible, the economic should have dropped the value of all of those homes by, I figured, maybe as much as 20%, because you could not any longer deduct the real estate taxes, but it turned out to have virtually no impact.
I think you'd have to ask the economic experts that. They did estimate that only 28% of the effect of the residential exemption would be canceled by this shift. So that means 72% of that exemption would still apply, and you wouldn't see a huge change in the values. You just see some change in the values. Mm-hmm. So I don't think you're going to look at a 20% change.
No, I'm just talking about the values based on the non-deductibility of real estate taxes.
Yeah. They're also looking at Lexington versus the surrounding towns which don't have this. If you could buy if you could buy a home, if you have $1 million to spend on a home, are you going to buy this home in Lexington with it, or are you going to buy this home in Lincoln with it?
Well, of course you're going to buy in Concord because
the people online cannot hear right now.
And
it's funny because I tripped over this thing when I was looking at the other stuff, and I said, "Wow, look at this!"
It is a stealth exemption. This exemption was on the books when I started on the Board of Assessors back.
Well, it reminds me of Harry Potter, platform 9 3/4. You got clause 41.5. You go somewhere in between, and you've got this secret.
It might be the C.5.
Yeah.
There's also a clause 5C 3/4. So, I mean, why does the legislature do this? But they do.
They do. They do.
That might explain why only one town has adopted it, right?
Yeah.
Anyway,
nobody else.
Okay, let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it because it's interesting.
It is.
Okay. So I put it on a slide. There are, of course, many things we could compare it to, but I just compared it.
Dinner is pretty much ready.
Oh,
good.
All right.
Just compared it to means tested in clause 41.
If you're online,
since they were since they seem to be the most similar, and also because clause 41C is what this would replace.
And what is 41C right now?
41C is $1,000 exemption for someone who qualifies under
Oh, I see.
very, yes, they're all,
Right here.
yeah, there's some very strict requirements.
No, but I
Yeah.
thought that we had adopted the higher income limits in Concord.
I think these are the higher income limits. These are the ones, I
No.
thought these were the ones in your slide.
For 41C? For
Really?
41C?
I
I'm
thought
pretty sure-
my summary slide,
Yeah.
because I thought we had captured that we opted for the highest limits.
Yeah, I tried to, I tried to
These, they
copy your
were
slide.
similar
actually,
to
but
the ones
Yeah.
for 41C and a half.
No,
Okay, well,
well, they might,
think
they
you're-
might be for what the statutory limits are.
yeah,
But for 41C and a half, we have an option to change them, which we, more than we can change them for 41C.
really. Because, and then I had heard as well that with the means tested exemption that we have, that we sometimes get 41C as well,
Oh,
sort of carve it out.
yes.
Right.
Well, anyone who, I think actually anyone who qualifies for 41C, I believe also qualifies for the mean tested in.
Right.
we
Well, for sure.
think we
I
have
mean,
any
if you look at
41Cs that
this,
don't
they
qualify.
absolutely would.
Yeah, they
But,
would.
okay. And
We
then
only have 3 people eligible.
Yeah,
one of
and
the
I
things
think I think they're
concerns
all
me
means tested.
when I look at this though,
Yeah.
like with 41C and a half, right? You look at it and you go, well, that's, a substantial potential exemption. But that because the limits are almost exactly the same as what our means tested one is.
Yeah.
We only have 38 people in the program. And you just think, looking at the limits, yeah, there are asset limits, but they're not tiny, that those 275,000 in assets is something, that's, and I would assume that we would have a higher number of people in the means tested program.
Yeah, you might think so. And maybe, and
Have we gotten any new applicants since there's been some?
we have, we
have.
every year we get a few new.
But I mean, like in this past 3 weeks or so, we made kind of a push to
Right.
try to get a little more
But
PR out there.
Yeah.
with these, with,
Yeah.
with these
Okay.
limits, these are people who would qualify for subsidized housing. This is the AMI, it's like.
Yeah, they're
80%,
below the 80%
It-
AMI.
But
Yeah.
the asset,
Yeah.
I think the assets would disqualify them. Yeah, they would
Yeah.
disqualify them, yeah.
Yes, it was we increased it to 275 this year, and mainly to test the water to see, can we
Would that get more people?
we
in?
think we should have more than 38 people in
Right.
this
But
program.
I think one of the
Trying to-
reasons
we're
that
trying to
we
see
may not
a little
have
bit more.
done a 41C and a half in the past was because it has no asset test. So in other words, you could have huge assets
Right.
as long as you live a fairly frivolous lifestyle,
Right.
you don't take money out of your retirement account.
Mhm.
Right.
Or you find other ways to avoid declaring income. You could still get this big exemption. And so that is the one sort of moral hazard of 41C and a half,
Yeah.
but I consider it a small hazard personally.
Is that an exemption or is it a deferral?
It's exemption.
It's in
In this case,
it
it's
is a
exemption.
straight up
Deferral
exemption. You
still
never
on
have
the
to pay it.
books. That's always been on the
Yeah.
books.
There is, I mean, I might mention here that there are a number of states that have laws that are not on the books in Massachusetts that apply to seniors 65 plus that are considerably more generous than 41C and a half. I mean,
Yeah,
things like
sure.
we will freeze your we will freeze
That's your
your
rate
tax
forever.
at with the value you're paying this year. That's what you pay forever.
Wow.
Yes. Yes. I think Maine. Does Maine
Yes,
do that?
Maine has that.
Maine does
and a
that.
couple of the states, but I've heard that New Jersey has something. I think New
Right,
York
but
has
we
something.
don't, so it's not a thing.
Yeah,
we can-
Okay, sorry.
So we don't have that, but obviously it's something that people do in some places.
Yeah. So.
And- yeah.
Tell us more about 41C and a half.
Okay, so let's go on to the next slide, I think. All right. So it is again, like the residential exemption, it's available to all cities and towns. And the differences between this and the residential exemption are it's got an age limit, which 70 years by law, we could lower to 65. The town meeting would have to do that. It's got a length of residence limit. I think the same property I'm actually wrong about. I was talking through this with an assessor from Bedford this weekend, and she pointed out that it appears that it's only 5 years in some property.
Yes, in town.
It doesn't even.
In
use that
Massachusetts,
town.
in Massachusetts,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
so, yeah.
And again, the 10 years in Massachusetts, which we could reduce to 5, which would if you reduce that to 5, then the two domicile requirements are the same. And there's an income limit, which is similar to which we can adjust. I think it's relatively low by statute, but I believe we can change it to the circuit breaker limits. And by statute, we can only exempt up to 5% of the average residential property. But again, town meeting can vote to increase that.
What would that number be right now? What is 5% of the average?
Yeah, 5% of the average would be, let me think a second.
It'd be like
20.
237,000.
Yeah,
You know the
Oh,
average?
5%. Sorry, no.
5%. We'll take
58,000.
a quarter of the 20.
It'd be like 58,000
Take
How'd you get
1/6
that?
of 30%.
because property value is 1.16 million.
It doesn't
That's the
mean
median.
5%
have 60,000.
of
That's the median.
Oh, of the value.
Because
Okay,
it's
of the value at
average.
all. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
It would be about 60,000.
60, okay.
Okay, thank you.
5% of the value of that
Well, you-
property?
No,
or of
average
the
home.
total?
Average home.
It's like the residential, we take the average property, we take 5% of that. So it's a fixed dollar value across the board for everyone based
other
on
words,
that
it's
percentage
not-
of that value.
Only 5% of the town's total valuation
It's almost the
can
same
be
as the average. Yeah.
devoted to this.
Yeah. Median's almost the same as the average in Concord now,
It's close.
because it used to be a pretty big difference.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, we have had actually.
Rising
Yeah.
tide.
Oh, because these have come down in value and okay. that-
Well,
yep,
we've had, I think we've had some compression of values. toward the-
Exactly,
toward the center.
exactly.
Um,
Yes.
The
Okay.
same sort of thing that Lexington would be afraid would happen with residential exemption is happening anyway.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Well, it's basically, yeah.
Doesn't matter.
So, do you know what the circuit breaker limit is approximately?
Yeah, so that was actually on the
On that
previous
sheet.
slide. It was 64,000 for single, 80,000
Oh,
head
I
of
see.
household,
Okay.
96,000 filing jointly.
Okay. Let's go.
All right.
Wait a
Okay.
minute. That's already what it is in your example.
Yes,
Right.
that's.
Oh.
He's assuming.
I get- I-
It's
assuming you
just
take that.
by local option.
I assumed when I
Assumed we
wrote,
would take it.
when I did the side by side comparison, I assumed
Oh, I see.
that I made
Because
generous
if we didn't,
assumptions that
why
town
would we
meeting would be
bother?
generous.
Because it would be
Yes.
basically the
Yes.
risk
All right,
that.
just so I understand, but this is a maximum that it can go to, right? Okay, right.
This,
right.
yeah, those are optimistic assumptions, assuming that town
Got it.
meeting, says yes, yes,
Got it.
yes, yes, yes,
Okay.
give it to as many people as we can.
But all of these, except the residential exception, need to be adopted by the town meeting.
That's right.
Yes.
Or a town vote, townwide vote.
Actually, yes, it's worse. Let's get on,
Yeah.
let's get on to the next
It's
slide.
on there.
Because the procedure for this is, 41C has an extra procedure, which we don't have for many of these things. Oh, yeah, there has to be a vote at the polls during a regular town election. And there's very specific language dictated by the statute, which I find completely incomprehensible.
Well, that'd be
But-
normal.
Yeah. But we would just have to educate the voters. Yes, this is what a yes vote means.
Yeah.
Know that before you go in, because you're not going to be able to tell from your ballot.
We have a process to do that.
Yes. So we can then decide, and then the town meeting can decide to make all those other adjustments that I made in the other slide.
Okay, good.
So I think if I understand this correctly, it has to be a regular exemption. I think so. I think this has to be the same election where we elect the moderator and the new select board members and the new school committee members.
Well,
and
this
so
is a town election.
Yeah,
We can
the town
call a
election.
town
Oh,
election whenever, but
next,
we don't want to.
I'm not sure that we can do it at just any old. I
Okay.
don't know if we can do it in a special election. If we could, it might
I
be
mean,
worth
it
asking
seems
about.
it'll
Would
be
you wanna-
soon enough
Yeah.
anyway. It'd be soon
Yeah.
enough. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we could get it. We could get, even if we went through the exact procedure laid out here, we would still be able to do it
Oh,
in
here's-
FY 2025.
Yeah.
Which
Which
is,
is, I think that's what people are looking at is FY 25. Is because
Which
that's
is-
when we've got
which is-
the,
probably the soonest it was also probably this, maybe
Yeah.
even sooner than we'd be able to get to the full amount of a residential exemption if we
Yeah.
went down that
exactly.
route. So it's a reasonable time frame. And this would then replace 41C. But anyone who's on 41C would qualify for 41C and a half.
But one benefit over the residential exemption of 41C and a half is we would get the 41C money from the state.
We would still receive that money.
We
It would
wouldn't
only
get
be,
all the money for 41C.
it's only
and a
maybe
half, but
$1,500 a year, but
Wait,
Take
we'd
it.
still get it.
say that again? I didn't.
So the
catch that.
state today,
Yeah.
if people qualify for 41C, the state recompenses the town for that exemption for those
Ah.
people.
Okay,
So that's great
yeah,
for us. If you do 41C and a half, though, it's a bigger exemption and they only still give you what you would have gotten under 41C. But now I would assume because we would have a bigger number of people participating,
Yep.
we would get total, more total funds. With the residential exemption, there is no government, state
Yes, I see.
participation
Yep.
in the residential exemption.
Well, because we get the same
Yeah.
tax income. There's no decrease in the amount we collect under.
Right, right. But,
It just comes from different.
and by the way,
Yeah.
the two are not mutually exclusive necessarily.
Yeah. And the 50, right. That's also
Yes.
true.
yes.
That's also true.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So you can do a little of this,
Yeah.
a little of that, and
Make it really complicated.
Yeah.
all right. Anyway, let's keep going.
Anyway, the $1,500 is pretty much we're gonna get it one way or the other, whether we do this or not, because we're either going to keep the people on 41C or we're going to change to this, and it's going to be the same amount of money.
Well, okay.
I don't think we get. I don't think
I
we
think
get.
we would get higher participation.
Yeah, we would get higher participation, but the state's not going to get them as the $500 for the extra people.
It stopped doing that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. They just give us a fixed amount each year.
Yeah.
Darn. Okay.
Sorry to say. Okay. I'm glad you've gone to the next slide. Thank you. So we have Ashland, which is the only one who's done this in all the years that it's been on the books. I don't know why nobody else has, but they've only done it, and they've only done it fairly recently.
Okay.
And so far they have been having a special town meeting each fall to set the tax rate because they want to set it above 5%. They've been setting it at 11.25.
Yeah.
But there's no reason it has to be 11.25. It could be higher.
So, you haven't talked to anybody in Ashland?
We have actually been in contact with them.
Yeah. What did they say? How's it going?
So it's going good. He increased it this year to 11.25, where it was at 9 or
Okay.
a little less before. And he said it was going well. And the clerk said it was difficult keeping up with the trust because
if some people cash in their IRA and fix a roof or fix
Yeah.
part of their house, she has to not qualify them anymore because it would go over sometimes the limit.
Yeah.
So she said it was a lot
Go
of,
over their income.
lot of going through paperwork and
That's
it was
too bad.
They go
difficult.
over the income limit.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. And then do you know how many are participating in Ashland?
He did say that there was a lot. I forget how many, but it was a good amount.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's interesting. I mean, it sounds positive, but
Yeah.
yeah. All right. Show us an example.
Okay. So let's go on to
I
the
had
next
one more
slide.
question.
Oh, yes.
I didn't quite follow on the slide. What is the 11.25%?
Okay. So it's 11, they exempted 11.25% of their average, of their average single family
Which
home
is
value.
under 600,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So-
Ashland. It's not Concord.
So 11.2% of their average came out to 62,000, which would be 5% for us.
Right,
Right.
right.
But I think we would do more than 5%.
And out of that, what would it be, the actual tax exemption be in Concord at the 60,000? At the 5%?
At 5% level, yeah. I think it would be it would be similar to the,
It'd be like $600.
yeah, so 1296 on 60,000. So
Can't do that in my head.
well, let's go on to the next slide where I worked out, where I worked it out.
There we go.
Kind of
Yeah.
confused on that.
So what it would take, I worked out what it would take to get us to 1,000.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm sure I ran the 5% numbers. I just don't remember what the
Okay.
what the result
Okay, that's
was.
fine.
But to get to 1,000, we only need to go to 8%. So 5% is most of the way, more than half the way there. An 8% exemption, assuming we had 1,000 qualifying properties, that's 32% of the senior households, which is a total of 17% of everyone. Then 8% would get us to a somewhat more than $1,000 off of the median value.
Median, right, okay. Okay, good, thank you.
Everyone else gets a couple $100 added to at the very high end, a few $100s, but most people, a couple $100.
It's far more targeted.
Yeah, it is it's more of it's not quite as much of a laser focus as our means tested exemption, but it is very much more targeted than the residential.
5% would be 774.
There we go.
Okay, that sounds about right. And I worked at 8% because I figured we were shooting for $1,000.
Yeah.
Or more.
So,
And as you can see, and it doesn't change much between, if your house is worth a little bit more, you don't lose that much from the exemption. The total, the middle third of everyone, they're all about 1,000. The
right.
bottom
And
third a
so
little
this
bit more.
really comes down to what is the problem we're trying to solve, right? So if the problem is we're trying to solve is reduce taxes for people in lower value properties, residential exemption is for that. If our problem we're trying to solve is seniors that are potentially priced out of their properties, this is specific to that.
Right.
So
Right. But
I think it really comes down to what problem we solve.
well, and it's not an either or, as you
And
pointed
yeah,
out.
it could be
Yeah,
both.
we have both problems. Okay.
And we already have something for the senior means tested. I mean, the 41.5 just seems so much simpler to
Yeah.
me. But we already have senior tax relief through the senior means tested and the 41, right? We have nothing for people who are challenged but aren't seniors. We don't have anything for them.
Right. On the other hand, I estimate there are about 3,000 senior households, and we're only reaching 40 of them.
Right. That's what strikes me
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
the most confounding thing is that
I-
why aren't people either applying for or qualifying for this residential,
Yeah,
or
I
senior
think
means
I
tested?
think it's just that
And then-
difficult.
It's
yeah.
too
And then
complicated.
the other question I have is, we had the tax fairness committee,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
why didn't they come to us with the 41C.5?
I wish we had known about it.
I could, so that's
I
the
spent
thing.
5
is
years
I was
working on
there
this, and
too, and I
was
don't
unaware of it.
remember,
Yeah.
like I was the liaison, and I don't remember any discussion of 41C.5.
Heard of it until
And the
this
only
week.
time I ever,
Yeah.
I literally was looking 3 weeks ago to form that table. And I read about this thing and I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I heard about it because of one of the assessors in Bedford, who I happen to have a personal connection with, was looking into it and wanted to know if I knew anything about it. I said, 41C.5, what's
Yeah. So,
One community does it.
Yeah.
So.
okay, so,
It's very anecdotal, but I know I had an elderly client who would have qualified for a lot of these exemptions, and we put together all of the pamphlets for him to get him to go and apply for them. We just never did. And I think it's probably a lot, the same reason that a lot of the people in that age group don't vote. They are just kind of, they're out of the system for some reason. They just don't participate in any way, which is something that, we have to puzzle out why that happens and what we can change. But the residential exemption is, I think, the only way that we can protect the lower value homes from the really economically unacceptable impact of the middle school bond service.
well, can you go to the possible effects slide? Because I
Yes.
think that's key.
Well, I
Henry.
think, the next one is the risks, which let's just
It just shows that
go
it's
through
a
that
milder
quickly.
risk.
I just
It's
compared it to the
severe.
4%. Yeah, right. And the risks with the 8% are a little bit more than 4%, which was the very low risk one.
Yeah,
And I also think because we're dealing with a smaller number of parcels, being off by 60 is less likely than when we're
Yeah.
dealing with everyone. So
right.
enough said. Next slide.
So this is what I found. This slide is really interesting.
Yeah. So I looked at, well, obviously there's the direct effects. We have a tax shift. It'll be from the lower income owner occupant senior households. There's a large tax break there. Other taxpayers get a small percentage increase. So it'll be higher income, younger people, rental properties, et cetera. We would, of course, replace 41C according to the law, and we would continue to get the fixed reimbursement from the state for 41C, which is a very small amount of money, but we would still get it. So it wouldn't go away. It also wouldn't increase. Indirect effects, I looked through the ones in Lexington, and it did not appear to me that their reasoning for their effects applied much to this, because they're assuming that somebody could come in and simply buy this property and immediately start benefiting from this exemption. Whereas if with 41C.5, you'd have to be 60, you'd have to be over 65, you'd have to be, your income would have to be within certain limits. If your income is within those limits, how are you buying this house?
Yeah. Start with.
And so it seems like it would not open the market up to much effect. And I think it would have a virtually nil effect on
sort
house
of keep
values.
people in their homes.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
the goal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So basically the direct effects would be the effects we would get, which would be to aid the lower income seniors with a very slight shift towards other properties.
Yeah. Okay.
So
now we get to the finale.
Conclusion, comparison. I just summarized basically, and I don't think we need to necessarily go over this because I think we've hashed over these things pretty well.
Yeah.
But I just thought it'd be nice to have a final slide showing them side by
Yes.
side. If we barge into the residential exemption quickly, or versus clause 41C.5, do we do it slowly, and so forth?
Yeah. Now, I think one of the things I want to note is it's not like we need to make any decisions tonight. The idea here is to really understand the options that are in front of us for implementation, perhaps in this next year. And then secondly, just the state of preparations of the assessor's office, I think, to implement any of these. Is there any assessment that you make, so to speak, on the relative difficulty of implementing these programs?
I think it's just making sure people apply and qualify and that it will be timely, but we could get contractors to help us out. And we already are doing exemptions, so we'd know how to do it. It's just the excessive amount if we
Right.
did residential and making sure the word's out, you have to apply, for this.
Right. Okay.
So what I would like to see that would help us work in that direction would be to get some a fairly, actually a very specific list of steps that need to be taken to get from here to the implementation of the residential exemption, and a timeline for those steps that need to be taken, and when the board would have to make the final decision to vote to implement it in order for it to go into effect for the next fiscal year. And that we get a better estimate of the exact amount or an approximate amount that would need to be exempted to essentially to erase the financial impact of the school bond debt service on the homes under $750,000, to pick a number in assessed value. And that in doing that, we would want to consider whether or not we could have a more efficient way to determine the majority of the homes that qualify by using some method like running state tax records against voter lists and so on, or against real estate tax records that would simplify the process. And if we had that, we would know what we needed to do and when we needed to do it, if we decided we were going to do it.
Well, I can tell you that a 10% level would probably, for the residential exemption, would get you to the numbers that you're looking for.
Mhm.
What he did was ran a number that said for your median household, there would be $1,000 cut.
Right.
That's what
Well,
led him
okay.
to these.
Well, the median household is somewhat higher
Yes, it is.
and,
Yes, quite.
but, and that would,
Almost twice.
that would make, taking, the median of 1.2 million or thereabouts probably has a much greater increase effect on the tax rate than taking a somewhat lower level for the exemption. And those are the homeowners that need it the most. And we can, I think, accomplish that by if the projected debt service for the middle school is around $1,000-1,200 a year, which is for the median home about $100 on their monthly mortgage bill. If we could take it at the $750,000 level, we probably could accomplish most of what we needed to accomplish without overduly raising the tax rate on the remaining value.
Okay, but you realize only 4% of Concord properties are valued at 700,000 or less. So 750,000, that we're talking about probably 6% of the properties in town.
Well, I guess we need to look at.
So I'm just saying.
Look at some of the numbers, but I think that it's the people who, because remember, it's not that their tax goes down to nothing. Because even if you have a house that's worth 1.2 million and you take an amount that would erase that value, they still are paying the higher rate on a portion of the value of their home.
Right, so
But
it
the net
depends.
is still,
He's
the net-
already netted
the
that.
net is
He
saying
did these
$1,000.
calculations.
Right, so it depends if you want to target the lowest 4% or the lowest 33% or median and under. It depends how you want to target it.
Well, maybe we're gonna look at the options and see
Mhm.
what's tolerable.
Mhm.
Well, but I mean, I
Maybe-
think that's what we need to, we're going to ask for
Point is this, I think that the as appealing as the gradual implementation is, my concern is that people are paying because the debt service will hit us next year. And the people will already be paying the much higher tax on their homes almost immediately.
I understand what you're saying, Henry, I really do. But I think we would need to increase that amount from 700,000, maybe up to 950 or something, so that we
Oh,
get
I wouldn't
more
object
people
to
to
that.
participate.
Oh, I wouldn't.
Yeah, I
object
was
to
going
that.
to say.
Because
it still means that my taxes are still going to go up by probably $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. But you know, that's
you can afford it.
But that's the reason that they pay me so much to be on this board.
Exactly.
so,
Okay.
okay. And then, yes, Linda,
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the entire presentation. So let me say that first. I particularly, it's helpful to hear how we're thinking about teasing out the kind of variables and different scenarios we need to understand to implement this. If we were to go ahead, here's my one item in particular that I'd like to add to teasing out that list of what we'd like to see, and I'm not quite sure how to get at this. But I remember from a previous conversation with the Board of Assessors on this, that there were, at that time, this was within the last year and a half, there was going to be approximately 900 at the time, renters who were going to be affected by actions that the board was going to take going forward. Now, yes, the assessment of the tax increase will go to the for the schools, not for the exemptions, but for the additional amount coming online for the schools will go to the landlords. But I can tell you, just looking at what's happened for some people with the rents in the last couple of years, that immediately got passed on to the renters. And many of the people who are in that category are some of the very is another additional group of individuals that we're very concerned about. So is there any way to somehow get some better data on that before we have to make these decisions? Because I think there's, in addition to the concern for the homeowners that are going to be heavily impacted and not in a position to handle it well, we cannot ignore this group.
That's why I have to say I'm partial to the 41C.5 now that I've heard about it. And actually, I would like to add to that request that Henry made was also, I think you've described it a little bit here, but just that more or less the timeline and the specific steps to Concord that we would take if we were to implement 41C.5. So I think also at this point, I'd like to open up just briefly to the public, just to give the public a chance to ask or a question or make a statement. And then we'll move on because we are out over time. It's been excellent, but we do actually have other business that we have to take care of
Just have
tonight.
one really quick question. Does the Board of Assessors plan to make a recommendation?
We have not discussed the possibility of making a recommendation. I think that
You do every year for the residential exemption.
yes. Well, I guess we will have. We do typically, yes.
Yeah.
So we will probably. Well, if we have not taken action to pre-qualify people before the classification hearing, then I expect our recommendation again at that time will be don't do it this year.
Uh-huh.
I said because I think the experience in Oak Bluffs is you need to start early. You would decide soon to do it.
My feeling is that in the past, we've relied on the Board of Assessors recommendation. And I think this year, I'm glad that the select board is taking a more active role.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with that, but let's say if we said to the assessors, we want to do something. Do you recommend starting slowly? Do you recommend 41C? I think it would be good do you recommend a little of each, or is that way too complicated? I guess I would like to hear something besides don't do anything.
But it is a policy decision.
It is.
Oh, we're going to decide. They're just going to,
So,
yes.
so the recommendation, I think, is administrative. And I think that the
That's part of it.
policy is the decision we have to make. as to
Absolutely.
What the tax policy is and what it is we want the Board of Assessors to accomplish to fulfill.
I agree with
The
all.
advice about gradual implementation, for example, I think is sage advice. So
It is.
if we're going to do the residential exemption. Anyway, let me ask the public, any member of the public who would like to come up, state their name and address, make their comment or ask their question. We've got an open seat here and a microphone. Anybody? We will at the very end of the meeting, but if you just have something on this topic, there's an opportunity now to speak to it. Okay, is there anybody else online? I do see one hand raised. If you unmute yourself.
Sure, Carlin Reed, 83 Wits End. This presentation has pretty much convinced me that the residential exemption is a bad idea at this time. It's also convinced me that we need a lot more data on how you define senior households. How many seniors are renting versus how many seniors own their property. You're ignoring that piece, and I want to emphasize that Linda is spot on. We need to be looking at that component before you make any decisions, even for the 41C approach, because you're not looking at the renters. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And let's move on then to our next topic. Thanks for a very thorough presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to shift gears pretty dramatically
I'm gonna go to
here.
the restroom. I'll be right back.
Yeah. So our next topic is the 2022 Hazard Mitigation Plan approval.
Yeah. Great, thank you. And we have Assistant Fire Chief Walter Latta here this evening. Walter led the staff effort on development of this plan, and he's here to talk to you about the plan and how we use the plan and why it's required.
Okay, thank you very much and welcome.
Good evening. How are you?
Doing great.
Thank you for having me. So myself and Eric will be talking about the importance of the plan. So in 2017, the All Hazards Mitigation Plan was adopted by the town, and every 5 years you have to renew it.
Yeah.
So we were able to have 20 internal stakeholders review the plan and go over everything that's pertinent to their department. This is ranging anywhere from culverts to dams to we looked at the climate change and brush fires.
Yep. Okay, please, if you're going to have a conversation, if you could step outside. Thank you. All right.
So back in June, we were notified to start this plan. Myself and then Sustainability Director Amanda Cohen took on the plan back in June. And we looked at how do we start this? Where do we start? And we decided to bring in, like I said, internal stakeholders. And we also were very fortunate to have Metropolitan Area Planning Council, MAPC, coordinate all the meetings. They are the subject matter experts in this. And we've used them for other various things, but we were very fortunate to secure a contract with them. The contract was for $28,000, just over $28,000, but we were able to identify, for example, 142 critical infrastructures in this town, ranging from, like I said, bridges, dams, the hospital, all those things that need to be identified. And this year, I would say that we definitely took a hard look because the summer was such a dry summer and the drought. We looked at climate change. We looked at areas that could be potential for brush fires. And we've already started to institute some of those we instituted some of the things that came out of this plan. We're starting to work with the GIS folks to draw up all the maps of the old rifle range. We had a member of the Concord Fire Department walk out there with the GIS to capture over 4 miles of trails that had never been captured before. So I'm just going to talk about the fire side. And I know the DPW side has already started to look at culverts and things of that nature. So the plan hasn't even been adopted yet. We're already starting to look at some things that has been brought to our attention. So we were also very fortunate to have a private citizen, John Baldock, I hope I'm saying that his last name correctly, help us with some of the climate change initiatives and how to identify some of those things in this town. So some of the low areas that we looked at were like landslides. That's not very prevalent to this area. So that you'll see there's 34 or 36 areas that we've identified, and landslides was on the low end, but on the high end, climate change, brush fires and things of that nature are on the high end. So,
Right. Well, and climate change meaning like the impacts of that, like flooding.
yes, so flooding. And then also one of the things that myself and Chief Judge did not too long ago, working with the library, was on brush fires, is that you're starting to see studies are starting to show that you're not having the snow events. So therefore, like we're already dry this time of year, maybe, so you're seeing the snowpack diminish significantly. So therefore you're exposed to brush fires for a longer duration. So you look at it all from the all natural events, flooding, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes. Obviously we don't have a lot of earthquakes in this area, but we did identify that as a potential.
Okay. Yeah, I've zeroed in on this page 28 of the report. I guess it's page 112 of our packet, that the hazard risk summary. Yeah, I think it's a pretty compact summary of where we stand. And then you talk about the specifics of the, flood areas in town. There are quite a lot of them.
Yes. One of my research papers identified back in 2007, I think in one day we did over 53 water related calls for, people having flooded basements. There was significant rainfall that occurred. At that time, I worked for Maynard, and we had responded to just as many, because when the Aspet River starts to rise, you start to see the people that have flood events. You already have a high water table, so you have the basements being impacted and things of that nature. So,
yeah. I guess 2010 was the
2010,
most
okay.
recent.
Yes.
Severe.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I'm just curious, like, any questions from the board about the plan? I mean, I thought it
I
was
think that the real theme is it's a very comprehensive document, but what they need is a vote of the select board to approve it.
that's right.
In a
In
very
order
short
for,
time frame. And so, and this,
Well, I was curious whether people feel that we could make the vote tonight.
Absolutely. There's no way I feel that we have the expertise in order to truly evaluate this. And I think this is one of those things where I'm happy to rely on the expertise of our employees who do this work for us. And I just say, thank you very much. Congratulations. And I'm happy to vote to adopt it so that we can move on to the next step, which I understand the real motivation for this is to make us eligible for further grants for planning. So let's just get it done.
That's correct. And Eric, if you're online, Eric could probably speak to the grant portion of that on the sustainability side of that a little bit better.
Yeah. Eric? Oh, I see Linda's got her hand raised as well. Let's start with Linda, since she's a board member. Linda?
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for the presentation. I agree that we should move this forward as we can. But I do want to ask one quick question, and that is, since it was mentioned that they have already identified some specific things like the culverts and looking at some other things that may or may not have been adequately included in this plan. Will that be somehow captured in an addendum that's attached to this plan, or what's the plan?
A great question. So because I was part of this right from the beginning in June, like I said, we were able to identify the brush fires and that could potentially affect for example, the old rifle range. So we've already started mapping out that, getting ahead of the plan being adopted. And I don't want to speak for the engineers or the DPW, but I know they've already started with the culvert assessment.
Yeah.
So things are starting.
Even if you just label those two things, you're already doing the assessment, you're already doing, such and such. Is that specifically included in this plan narrative?
That was also identified in the 2018 plan. So it's like an ongoing assessment.
Okay, so it sounds like we might be covered then. Thank you.
I think it's a very comprehensive document. I was at one of the public meetings. There were 3 public forums, and it's very impressive. It's very comprehensive. Excellent job.
Yeah,
I like the one where you have the Massachusetts heading down the coast. Yeah, they have the image of Massachusetts, and based upon the future weather expectation, it's as if we're already in New York State, or and now we're on our way down to South Carolina as the century progresses.
Well, yeah, I grew up near New York, and the climate
like
has
it.
really changed here. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then I guess I'd ask for a motion.
Okay, so my question is, do we want to?
Well, unless Eric Sims, I don't know.
Oh.
Do we have Eric on the line?
He's here. He didn't
I'm
pop
here.
on.
I think he's eating the dinner that was ready.
Okay, never mind. Then let's
So
go on.
we want a regular motion to adopt, or am I supposed to read this
Yeah,
resolution?
I've asked that you read that.
Oh, okay,
I tried to.
okay,
But he said read that.
okay. All
We
right.
have the thing to sign after we vote.
Yes.
It's signed right now.
Yeah. Oh, it was.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
In anticipation, I could always pull it back.
Breathless anticipation.
please don't pull it back.
So we can just vote to ratify your premature
Yes.
execution.
That's great.
Do we need to vote to adopt the resolution before we go through this whole thing?
Right, so should I read this whole resolution, right?
You said read the whole thing.
Okay, a resolution of the town of
We haven't
Concord.
voted, and it says down here that you adopted by a vote of.
So do we adopt first and then read the resolution?
My understanding was that was the adoption and the vote was going to come from reading that resolution.
Okay.
Okay.
Actually, all we probably need to do is just have somebody sign this, as Matt has done.
Well,
We have to vote.
Let's just
and
read,
sign
let's
it.
just read it. And
yeah, let's
Move
go
on.
ahead, and we're going to need.
Okay, resolution of the town of Concord adopting the town of Concord hazard mitigation plan updated 2022. Whereas the select board recognizes the threat and that natural hazards posed to people and property within the town of Concord. And whereas the town of Concord has prepared a multi-hazard mitigation plan, hereby known as Town of Concord Hazard Mitigation Plan, updated 2022. in accordance with the Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000. And whereas the Town of Concord Hazard Mitigation Plan updated 2022 identifies mitigation goals and actions to reduce or eliminate long-term risk to people and property in the Town of Concord from the impacts of future hazards and disasters. And whereas adoption by the Select Board demonstrates their commitment to the hazard mitigation and achieving the goals outlined in the Town of Concord Hazard Mitigation Plan updated 2022. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Town of Concord, Mass, that Section 1, in accordance with local rule for adopting resolutions. In accordance with our local rules for adopting resolutions, the Select Board adopts the Town of Concord Hazard Mitigation Plan updated 2022. So that is my motion. We need a second.
I'll second that.
Okay,
All right.
roll call vote.
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Mr. Dane,
Aye.
Ms. Hartman,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
and myself, Ms. Ackerman. Aye. So adopted by a vote of 5 out of 5 unanimously in favor on this third day of April 2023.
Very good. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Really well done.
No, thank you. Thank you for the support.
I really appreciate the climate information that's in here and
And whenever I have a problem, I'm gonna have to look at the plan and see what page my problem falls under.
You'll be
Do
able
they
to
know
find
about it?
You'll be,
figure 16 shows that a fault line, the earthquake fault line passes very close to us.
no, it was a pleasure to work with the 20 members that were on this, and I appreciate the support. We really do. And it was a collaborative effort, and everybody appreciates it. So we'll see you again in 5 years on this one.
Okay.
Good.
Won't be seeing me, but you'll see somebody.
See somebody.
All right. So now that brings us to our continued discussion and vote recommendations on annual town meeting warrant articles and assigning speakers for our presentations on those articles.
Do you know which ones the moderator is going to let us present?
I think we are going to discuss which ones we'd like
Okay.
to ask.
So you want to be ready?
That's
Okay. Okay.
and assign speakers for those.
Okay. That's fine.
So do we have a nice list of what we got left?
It was in here
It's in the
someplace,
packet,
wasn't it?
right after the- But this is what I think we have one.
There's so much in this package, you know.
Well, okay. So I thought we discussed 10 last time and we were going to wait.
That's right.
Okay, so we've decided to report at town meeting.
Yes,
All
I
right.
believe so.
Yep.
And then the next one is 14, and we have what we requested from the Board of Health on the opioid settlement.
Yes.
Well, not exactly.
I was going to say, when I read that letter,
Yeah,
it had the opposite effect of what I hoped.
me too.
In that
Too.
I had assumed that we had concrete plans. And then when
Yeah.
I read it,
Yeah.
it seemed like we had plans to make plans.
Mhm.
And I was disappointed, I have to say.
And also I was kind of alarmed that we're talking about another full-time equivalent.
And we're not helping people specifically.
We're studying how to,
Studying how to help somebody.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was very little evidence of an opioid problem. There were lots more problems.
Well, I mean, I feel like,
oh, that's a good point.
I don't know. I mean,
There was the only addiction.
I don't have to say it wasn't in this town, but I've lost one of my high school friends to opioid addiction. Okay, so it is a severe problem in our country, and I can't imagine that it's not here as well.
But they did this comprehensive survey with billions of data in it, and you still see it's the same things that, adolescents pretty much are going through, self-doubt, gender ambiguity, bullying, all the stuff all of the problems. And if the purpose of these funds is to in fact help treat substance abuse, which is where the money comes from, there's evidence of lots of other probably much more pressing mental health and physical health issues among the people in this town than opioid and substance abuse.
The question in front of us, though, is do we want to accept this money?
Right.
Not,
Oh,
No, and I have to say, yeah, this doesn't get in the way of me saying, let's accept the money.
Right.
But I just hope that we have a more concrete.
More
plan.
concrete plan.
What
absolutely.
happens to the money? I mean, of course, we'll take the money. You know, but what, does it just sit there until we decide what to do with it? Is that how it works?
Well, it does require appropriation. So like there is an article to appropriate a certain amount for fiscal 24, correct?
Two.
That's Article 14 to appropriate to be expended,
you're
and
right,
there
it's
should
to
be
appropriate. You're right.
right. So you accepted funds at special town meeting, right? Or we did something at special town meeting to make funds that had been received available. And this is a request to appropriate funds to be spent under the direction of the town manager with input from local stakeholders.
Would we have input to your decision as far as how to appropriate that?
Yeah, I think so. This evening, we could have had a representative of the Board of Health. I did not think that was necessary, so I told them that we could schedule
write her
that
letter.
in front of you at another meeting.
So if the town manager has control of those funds, the case can be made to her as to what we do with them. And if for instance, if the case is made for staffing support, that'd be something that'd be under her jurisdiction anyway. Right?
No, that would have to go through the budget process,
What?
right? Well, increases to staffing are included in our discussion with the town manager about the budget. This, I wonder is there a follow-on discussion with between the town manager and the select board as far as exactly how this money is going to be spent? That was the whole purpose of the question.
Well, that's why we got this letter.
Exactly.
what
That's
I'm
why we
hoping.
got this letter.
Yeah.
And I'm
So what happens if
Surprised.
Article 14 fails? What
We still
what
have the
happens
money.
to the
There's
money?
there's no appropriation of the funds.
We don't do anything,
Where does the money go?
just sits.
Well, right. It
Until we
sits
make
because it is a funding source that needs to be appropriated by town meeting.
Yeah.
Well,
by,
we don't-
by
we
when?
don't
Is there a
lose it.
deadline? Is there a deadline?
So I didn't anticipate this level of question. What I would say is I have people who can come to the meeting to talk about this. You can decide to report at town meeting and we could schedule a discussion next
Yeah, I
week.
think, I can just say, I would like to authorize the town manager to appropriate these funds. I'm not thrilled with the initial suggested appropriation, but that can still be refined.
And I have a question about that, which you might know. So if this substance use prevention coordinator is hired with these funds, we anticipate there's more funding coming in the next year, right?
There is funding coming in each year for the next 18 years. is
Oh,
my
18
understanding.
years. I thought it was 3 years. Okay,
No,
18 years.
It's a very
Yeah,
long
I
thing.
thought it was a
Ah.
very short-term
Well,
thing.
the amount varies over time.
Does it?
How much is
So
it now?
again, what I would say, if you would like to have a detail, I was not prepared
Right.
to be
Okay.
answering this level of detail for questions. And I have several staff members who could be here to help you with this discussion.
How much money are we talking about now?
This is $77,000.
So Carrie, the thing that alarmed me when I read that was hiring more staff. And I know that the letter also talked about a regional approach, which is something, and that's just for your feedback.
Mhm.
Okay. Are we ready to vote on this?
No, we're going
We're
to
going
wait.
to report at town meeting. You don't think that we should authorize the town manager to appropriate funds for opioid programs? I think we should. I don't think that there's any question
Question.
about that. The only question is exactly what programs they're spent on.
Okay.
And we certainly could make a more detailed report.
Yeah.
when we're further along in the process of knowing what we would be looking to do.
Okay.
Well, I'm interested in knowing if the amount's going to vary a lot, are we going to hit some years in there where we can't, where taxpayer funds are, the general,
So,
and that might require the staff.
yeah, I think that would be a better use of your time, is to have people who can answer these
Then I'd wait.
questions.
So then we're going to report at town meeting,
Why not? We don't have the answers to the questions we asked.
but okay, I just don't think that it's a question of whether we want to spend money on these programs. It's
how.
which programs and how to appropriate it. And we already have a commitment from the town manager to have a further discussion with town staff about those. So again, I mean, it sounds, we're making an article controversial by saying we're going to report at town meeting.
Mhm.
That is not controversial in my mind.
Is there any limit on what these funds could be used for?
Yes, there are specific guidelines about what they
Alright.
can be used
So
on.
we couldn't use this money to repair potholes.
No,
No.
no,
No, it has to be used in accordance with the settlement agreement
yeah.
Oh, okay.
that the town
But I mean,
is a
there's
part of.
still a fairly broad range of things, but they're all public health related initiatives.
And I think the concern is just adding headcount, adding permanent
Right.
headcount.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
Right, because I think it's a real need, opioid addiction. But we also have to start looking at headcount. So,
Not only that, but I think if a lot of it involves services to students, probably some of the cost of those programs should be picked up by the school system in their budget.
But I don't think it's students. I mean, I think a lot of like in the case that I would describe, it was someone in his 50s. This is a problem that's
It's a white collar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Okay,
Okay.
so
okay. You
are
convinced me.
are people okay to vote now?
Sure.
All right. Could I have a motion?
okay, motion to recommend affirmative action on Article 14.
Do I have a second?
Second,
Okay. Roll call vote.
Ms. Escobedo,
aye.
Mr. Dane,
I
Ms. Hartman,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
and myself, Ms. Ackerman, aye.
Thank you. Okay, now if we go sequentially, the next one is the public schools capital budget.
Oh, so we got that email today.
Yes.
So Carrie, can I just clarify something in the email that you sent us today? So this amount now is 495,000
Correct.
and it's all going to be bonded within the
Yes.
levy limit.
Yes.
Okay. Then I'm okay with it.
Okay.
and this is the maintenance activities at the Ripley School. Is that what we're
Yeah,
talking about?
by the way, I did have one question that came up, which was when I looked at, some of the things that are within that plan, there are a lot of kind of maintenance activities, and the question was whether they were bondable.
Yeah. So the statutes are very clear, and we review the specifics of what is proposed to be bonded, and we have a legal opinion that we have to seek to verify that the projects fall within the confines of the particular statute under which they're bonded. So
But we've done these in the past
we have done these in the past.
and similar kinds of projects.
And the
Okay.
auditors don't have a problem with that.
I would say similar, and they are reviewed upfront by bond counsel and on the back end by the auditors.
Which means if we voted, it still may not get approved by bond council, or the expenditures may not be approved.
It's still subject to approval by bond counsel.
Okay.
And it might change, what they end up using it for. It might change because of the vote that is given to the school is not necessary. It's not as specific. It's for projects that are presented, but it's not it's not specific to that. So if something changes, if a boiler goes at a building, they have the flexibility to be able to replace that under the town meeting vote.
Yeah, and I was at the school committee meeting, and I have to say that the discussion that took place around this public school capital budget, I was not as much concerned about the reduction this year because the reductions are really about initiatives that were very expensive
Right.
systems, or systems that weren't necessarily end of life.
Right.
So, there was some debate about whether they were the right projects to pursue in the first place. And just the cost benefit analysis, but none of that concerned me so much. But what did concern me was the underlying assumption that came out of that was that somehow the schools should not be responsible for sustainability, that it's the town that should be responsible for sustainability and should fund sustainability efforts, even if they're school facilities. Okay. And to me, I didn't feel that that was really appropriate, but it's not about the specific programs that were being discussed, but really is a more general policy making decision that I was very concerned.
As far as meeting our sustainability goals.
That's right.
Yep.
And also just in terms of a sort of responsible way of managing your facilities and the message you send to students that are in your facilities.
Yes.
What kind of facilities are we building? What kind of values do we have? This, I think it's very important. So anyway, but that's all aside. I still think we should approve this reduced capital budget for this year because the specific projects that were in scope, I don't think met kind of the hurdle for, necessity and or efficacy.
Okay.
Say we should or should not.
I think we should support this reduced budget because the projects that they cut were questionable
Right.
to
So-
one way or another.
So we're not
Needed reevaluation, let's put it that way.
So I wasn't going to bring this up, but since you're bringing up general issues, I'll just say briefly, I'm going to support this article, but I think that we should take a look going forward at some of these small capital items that gradually we need to wean ourselves off of bonding $25,000 items. It's not a real good financial practice, and they should be probably funded in operating budgets or with cash instead of bonded. But that's a general goal going forward.
Okay, so can I have
I
a
think we should
motion?
bond the entire operating budget. Sorry.
All right,
Just a joke.
can I have a motion?
Okay, move to support affirmative action on Article 18 for $495,000.
Second.
Okay, roll
Okay.
call vote.
Ms. Escobedo? Aye. Mr. Dane?
No.
Ms. Hartman?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
And myself, Ms. Ackerman, aye.
Okay. Article 19. I believe that the school committee is going to report at town meeting on this because they don't even know if there's
Right.
going to be a motion.
Right, I
could
think
do
we
the
should
same.
report at town meeting. Yep,
Do the same.
yep.
All right, so then move to Article 22, Citizen Petition Municipal In-Town Solar Generation Task Force.
Okay. The last time we talked about this, I mentioned that the CMLB was going to propose an amendment, and either I misunderstood or they've changed. And instead of that, they are going to have an up-down vote on April 12th and issue a statement for town meeting. So they're not, an amendment's not in the works.
Okay. And so the question is, do we make a vote tonight? Do we take any other action? Questions, comments? I'm looking online. Linda, do you have any thoughts?
We really.
I caught part of this discussion, but I'm not feeling up to date on it, so.
You know, I think CMLB's vote is not going to influence how I feel about it, I don't think. But I will say that I am of two minds with this article, and I can't authentically go yes or no.
Okay.
What are your two minds?
One is I understand the frustration of the petitioner because the town voted for something to happen that didn't happen. So I completely understand that frustration, and then this as another attempt to get the town to move. On the other hand, when I read this article, it's very prescriptive, and it's asking the select board to impanel a task force to do some of these things. I would have a hard time putting that together. Some of these things should be done by staff. Moving them off to a task force. We've already had how many different studies done by different consulting companies that come back and give recommendations that don't go anywhere for one reason or another, for good reasons, I think. Either they run into local opposition or the town doesn't want to use that, whatever. Another study that just simply does that, I don't think we're solving the real problem.
Okay, so you think that a task force might come up with a report of recommendations that would sit on the shelf again and nothing would get done again? Is
This, the way this is put together, yes. And I would envision a different kind of task force to actually move this forward. So again, I can't.
Then how about if we work on some amendments? I know you said CMLP maybe isn't going to do amendments. Maybe we should.
Can we?
Oh,
can the select board make an amendment?
You can offer an amendment.
It would have to be voted on like any other.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, how do you envision the task force being different from what it says here?
Well, just generally, I haven't looked at it specifically, but generally, I would hope that the task force would work collaboratively with the staff to help break through some of the barriers that they've encountered in the past to implement recommendations from other studies to get solar on municipal land. And that's about as specific as.
Okay, I see that Linda has her hand raised.
Yes, thank you. You're reminding me that either at the most recent chairs breakfast or at the public hearing, Dave Wood got up and was asked very specifically some questions about where he was on implementing some of the or at least studying some of the recommendations that were asked for a year ago. He at that in that setting promised that he would have some updated information and report before town meeting. So here's my question right now. Have we asked for updated information from him, specifically the select board?
No, but I mean, there's already town meeting action asking him for a report.
Right.
That's overdue.
Well, wait a minute. I think when he was in here in January, I think we did ask.
Well, and and he gave his status at that point, which did not include this latest information. But I mean, I don't know that it's saying that we haven't asked. I don't think that's. I think there's plenty of.
The bottom line is we're not feeling that we have any new information to operate on. So thank you.
Yeah, that's true.
I have an institutional.
Once again, the audience has lost the sound.
It's on, and for up to me, which it isn't at least at this point, we should probably adopt some kind of a rule that said if we're going to create a new task force or committee, we ought to eliminate two others.
So do we want to take a vote on this? Any other statements from board members? I also see the petitioner is online, and actually I have general public comment is that we've had public hearings on these statements, although we will have public comment at the end. I think a petitioner should be able to clarify, Dean, if you have any stuff to clarify about your article.
Hopefully you can hear me. Can you hear me? Yes, sort of. Okay, hold on a second. We're going to change.
Oh, it's pretty good. now.
Okay, now it's better.
It's better? Okay. Just to be clear about this, the reason that I'm attempting to kind of move the town on it is that it was 5 years last year that we had not built any solar, and it's 6 years, and it's 6 years now that we haven't built any solar. And so we're trying to make a statement that we need to take action. And so the light board had not. And so the task force as designed is collaborative. I did hear a comment about, well, we wanted something collaborative. The director has a seat at the table. The light board is invited, but they clearly don't have the bandwidth. And the goal is to offload what can be offloaded. Site evaluations, et cetera, do not take highly specialized people. So there are things that can be done to try to move this along. And I think that doing this in a collaborative way would be helpful, as opposed to the way it's not happening right now. That's all. And as I said, another year has gone by and we have not built any more solar. So it's now going on 6 years where nothing's been done since 2017. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
So you don't have any proposed changes or wording or anything in your article?
I consulted, one of the things that had gone back and forth, and Mary has been in the loop on this, is some modest wording changes about when the report is completed, it would be presented by the task force itself rather than by the CAB. That seemed like a weird hop that didn't need to happen. So I will change that. And I've been consulting with Carmen on that. The other piece of the puzzle is that the way it's worded right now, it urges the select board to stand up this committee. And I think within the scope of the warrant to change that wording to the town meeting establishes this committee. And it then grants the role of assigning members to the select board, which is different, means that the committee will exist. So that's, right now it just says, we're urging you to do this. But the alternative is to say that the town meeting votes to create the committee and it confers on the select board the role of putting people on it. So that's another possible change that I am contemplating at this time.
I would recommend a third change, which would be to change the committee that you're referring to the Climate Action Committee. That's a language change. Yeah, Matt, I fully appreciate that. And that will happen by the time we sort that out. And I understand it's going to be the CAC, not the CAB. So yes, okay. I didn't mention that, but that's just because it slipped my mind. That's all. Yeah.
So you're thinking of making a change that would compel town meeting to.
Well, town meeting.
I can't compel town meeting. Town meeting, however, can create a committee. That's what Carmen.
The task force. That's what Carmen wrote a memo.
I know, but I just want to make sure I understand it. So then it has to happen, and then the select board would actually appoint the people to it.
Right.
And they would have these goals.
Yes.
So essentially, this is the charge that we're looking at.
Yeah, effectively, it becomes the charge. Yeah. I mean, I suspect that the select board can have some latitude to craft the charge with formal language, but it should include the points.
Is this now to the personal study task force? Was that created in the same vein when the personnel study task force article?
No, the select board,
The select
there
board.
was a warrant article that I believe.
And then there was
filled
the
a bit.
fiber broadband.
Right.
That was
The last one
that
that,
was formed by
the
town
last one
meeting,
that
not by
Yeah.
the select.
Right.
And
last
then
time I-
as a result, when we took forward and made the charge, it had to use language from the warrant.
Right. That's
Motion.
correct. Because I remember writing the charge
Right.
and I did have to do
And
that.
it was presented to the town?
Well, town meeting voted it through.
And then, but then the final result,
No,
was presented
no,
to-
we
was
just
presented here.
adopted the language from the warrant article or from the motion. Yeah.
Right. So if I was writing the charge for this, I would take these bullet points.
no, I understand the charge. I'm saying the final plan, the result of the work of the task
Oh,
force.
well, this
Who is that
says
presented to?
it's presented to the,
To
it
town
says to the
meeting.
town. So, and to the light plant. So how would one present to the town?
At town meeting, he,
At town meeting.
under the article here reports.
Yeah. Okay. So we
Oh,
would hear
okay.
a report
You
at
do
town
that for
meeting.
broadband, right?
Yeah.
well, my intention
I
on
thought
this
so.
is
That's
to
what I
have the
heard.
report delivered to the finance committee and or the select board eventually. I mean, right now the language says.
Right now it says it goes to the town meeting.
Yeah.
Well, that's when
Oh, that
town,
says cab will present it.
when town
will
meeting
present.
sets up a committee, the report is to town meeting.
Yeah,
I
because
mean,
they're
I
the
didn't
ones-
see
yeah.
Carmen's email, but
Okay.
so I don't know if it says something different.
All right. Okay.
That's helpful. So are you making that change? Do
So
you-
the
Are you
la-
making- are you making the change that you're going to?
I'm contemplating it, Mary, but the last example of this that I can recall is where the town meeting was basically creating a committee was when we had some dispute over the study of where we were going to put the bus yard. And there was, one committee was being developed and DBM, organized a petition article that said, no, we don't like the way that committee is being organized. The town meeting will do this. And so we had literally two committees, doing the same work. I don't intend to have anything like that. It's not that contentious. I'm actually trying to do a collaborative thing here by bringing the director or his assignee onto the committee to work with us. So I don't think it's anything like that. We're just trying to make progress where the light plant is they're quite busy. They have a lot of priorities. And
All right, thank
this is
you.
yep, thanks.
Thanks, Dean. All right. So I guess the question is, do we want to vote on this tonight or do we want to report at town meeting?
I'm ready to vote.
So, Matt,
Yes.
just having listened to all this, we really do not know what the language is going to finally be presented at town meeting. So I'm not ready to move.
I'm in the same mind, Linda. I'm not ready, but
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm going to make a motion that we report at town meeting.
I don't think we even need to make that motion, do we?
No.
No.
All right.
Okay. All right. So we're ready to
Like
move to the
making a
next
motion
article.
to do nothing, which we could do without it.
Okay.
The next one is adopt the specialized stretch energy code. Now there were a couple of open questions. I asked
Eric.
and I also asked Brad Hubbard Nelson. I believe both of them are online to answer your questions because you had questions. For example, there was a question asked at the public hearing about whether it only applied to new construction or to renovations. And I believe we received information from Eric Sims today about this, that he's specifying it's only for new construction.
Yes, that's correct.
And then there were other questions about the applicability to affordable housing, right? And so it would apply.
It would?
Yes, because it's a building code, and so it's all structures. And then the third thing was a question about what sort of puts and takes relative to the fossil fuel free infrastructure pilot program that we're also, demonstration program that we're also participating in. And there are some minor differences basically under the, with the fossil fuel free infrastructure, there is no alternative model, right? There's an alternative model that under specialized stretch energy code that you can, as long as you wire for the electric or passive house, you can do mixed fuel, but in the fossil free infrastructure pilot program, you have to be all electric.
Right.
Okay, so that's the biggest difference.
Okay.
So does that answer the questions that people had?
Yeah.
So now the question is, can we take there was also a really interesting point made in Eric's memo, which was that as a member of the demonstration program, that if the town were not to adopt the specialized stretch energy code, it would be a kind of a question mark as to why we wanted to proceed with the fossil free infrastructure.
Oh, the 10. Oh,
demonstration.
okay. Really?
Because it just indicates sort of what the town's will is not really to pursue this kind of initiative. Because the fossil free fuel free infrastructure is actually more stringent in most respects. If you'd see what I mean.
I understand that. It's just that, are they really going to check?
Well,
Oh, yes.
Linda has.
yes, Linda.
Sorry, I didn't lower my hands.
Okay. So any other comments or questions on this article? Are we ready to vote on it? Okay. Could I have a motion?
Okay, motion to recommend affirmative action on Article 23.
Do you have a second on that? You have seconds?
A second.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Roll call vote.
Okay, Ms. Escobedo.
Aye.
Okay, Mr. Dane,
No.
Ms. Hartman,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
and myself, Ms. Ackerman, aye.
Okay. 4-1 vote. All right, that moves us to Article 25, appropriation for the 250th anniversary celebration. Question is, will we have a motion?
Yeah, I would say no. So I just before the meeting provided a written statement. I apologize for the tardiness of it. It's actually not a statement. It's like a thesis, right? That so I just wanted to go through this because you asked about it last week. So essentially, there are three sources of funding that could be available to support this article: free cash, property tax, or the ARPA funding. Free cash, I think, was what we had hoped we could use initially. You know, I don't need to go through all of this. We've talked about this before, but we essentially don't have free cash to be dedicating to this. If we're going to use $1 million to reduce property taxes as we do each year, and if we're going to use $250,000 to add to the 500 from the overlay to put 750 into the middle school stabilization fund. So property tax, obviously nobody has the appetite for additional property tax for anything given the proposed increase as a result of the budgets and the middle school building. So that leaves ARPA. Several months ago, I presented what I was seeing as the highest priorities for ARPA for fiscal 24. The largest amount there was $500,000 for the middle school solar. We've learned through additional analysis that $500,000 is probably only going to save about $6 a month to the average residential customer. So that doesn't seem like the best use of those funds. While we had not contemplated using ARPA for this particular use, given the significance of the event, the need to have some funding really dedicated to this effort so the committee can continue its planning efforts, and with the understanding that there may be state or federal grant funding that's available at some time in the future, but we just don't know. The committee has made a good effort to get our state legislative delegation and starting with with our federal legislative delegation on board to try to come up with some funding, but we just don't know. So I think at this point in time, it makes the most sense to dedicate up to $500,000. We don't, not the 600,000 that was asked, but up to $500,000 with the hope that maybe there'll be some state or federal grant money made available and we won't need to spend this. What I will tell you is our fiscal 23 priorities for ARPA spending, we're not even close to spending what we had hoped. We had originally talked about a total of $900,000. 200 of it was for transportation initiatives. We have an RFP out for a study. We don't know what the cost will be. We had identified 125,000 for economic development initiatives. Most of that was the staff person. Our staff person just started today, so we're not going to spend anywhere near that. We had 30,000 for affordable housing. A lot of the work that was identified, we've just been doing with the committees, and we've been able to make some good progress. 25,000 we had set aside for cell service and, working with the consultant. We still had some money left on an existing contract, existing purchase order. So I don't think we're going to get into that $25,000. So a lot of the money that we had targeted for the current fiscal year, we're just not moving at the same pace. And so
eventually some of those needs, but
yeah, we do, but not right now.
Like the transportation.
Yeah.
It could come out a lot higher than 200,000.
Well, I mean, we do, but we're not, we really were targeting about half of that for the study and about half for a grant match.
Okay. So it sounds like there's no motion expected.
So if the funding source is ARPA, there is no motion expected.
Okay. Well, I do appreciate the work that the committee's done in the last few weeks to kind of provide more details on budget and a financing plan and a revenue plan. And I do hope that continues to proceed. So that was.
Thank you.
So based on that work, which was really good, and the 200,000 that we've already received on a state grant, perhaps we can, and I think I saw something about 100,000 estimated for donations. And I guess I'm hoping we can use a lot less than the 500,000 of ARPA money.
The value of the money coming from this source is that the money that isn't spent stays there.
Yeah.
It's not like having to give it back.
I know.
Yeah.
But it also gets carried over to the next 2 years when we will undoubtedly have more expenses. And we will, in all likelihood, be in front of the town meeting next year with a more detailed plan.
Right.
Okay, let's proceed.
Okay, and I just want to comment again of what Matt suggested last time, and what you just said, Henry. If we're going to town meeting next year, I would really like to, if the 250th could give maybe a 1 minute plan that people understand what's coming. And I know that's up to the moderator.
Well,
but we talked about that with another article also that we might not move, that someone's going to make a statement.
Oh, you're talking about this year?
Yes, I think it would really be worth doing.
So it is a possibility, to just do a brief statement as to why it's not being moved and then, what the plan is. And I think it would be helpful to town meeting, but that's up to Carmen whether she would allow.
Right, just to show that one slide, year 1, year 2, year 3.
Well, I think one that had revenue sources as well.
It's all in one slide.
Okay. All right, so let's move to Article 30. So that's the easement.
Matt, can I ask a quick question about Article 26? I know we voted affirmative action, but
yeah,
the 500,000 that we have in here for the Warner's Pond. When will the town have an opportunity, or will the town have an opportunity to decide if that 500,000 or 550 is spent on dredging or removing the dam. What's the process for that? Do we know? Because we're kind of sidestepping
public
it.
meetings. I mean, there already was one, but.
Okay, so it's going to be
there-
public
yeah, I
hearings.
think it's a long process ahead of it. Oh, Diane has her hand up.
Good.
Diane, identify yourself, please.
Yes, good evening, Diane Proctor, 57 Sudbury Road. There are more public hearings coming and lots of discussion and lots of work with neighbors and concerned citizens. And I suspect it will be midsummer or early fall before they know exactly what they're going to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Diane. Okay.
But that's a decision that's a CPA decision as to whether to allocate funds to.
Well,
the
they've
project.
proposed that, and this would be a town meeting decision to approve those appropriations.
The appropriation without deciding whether it's for dredging or dam removal,
Right.
correct?
Right.
For the project.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Uh,
Thank you for that.
So, Carrie,
Yeah.
what about Article 30? Where do we sit with that?
So Article 30, the NRC voted to support the town meeting article authorizing the grant of the property. So there is town meeting action. We need town meeting to authorize the select board to issue. This seems like an easement versus a deed. But town meeting still needs to authorize the select board.
And so it would still be in scope, but it's going to be rewritten?
Well, so the article is grant or
both.
deed.
Yeah. It
Okay,
says both.
so
It's in-
the motion will specify that.
Yes.
And actually, what is it, a deed or an easement? I thought.
Well, I feel like I've seen both, but I went back in my emails and right now I'm seeing grant and there
still
is,
spinning, right?
yes.
We do have a town bylaw about the conveyance of real estate.
Yes.
And that's what we have.
And we
to
are
work
following
within,
that.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so we need a town meeting action either way. And the NRC has recommended that town meeting action. And so now we
Okay.
can potentially
Move
vote.
to recommend affirmative action on Article 30.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote.
Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Dane?
Aye.
Ms. Hartman?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
And myself, Terry Ackerman. Aye.
Okay. Now we are moving to Article 33. This is,
31.
oh, sorry, BD Swim and Fitness Center.
I
Why
have
didn't
down that we
why
did
didn't-
support 31 and 33. Both of them.
What? We didn't support?
You're saying we did?
I
We
think we
couldn't have
did.
done 33 because the planning board public hearing hadn't happened.
I know, but you brought it up anyway.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the BD Center.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. I don't know why we wouldn't have voted this last time, but let's,
Okay. Motion to recommend affirmative action on Article 31 BD Center.
Second.
okay, roll
Okay.
call vote.
Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Dane?
Aye.
Ms. Hartman?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
And myself, Ms. Ackerman, aye.
All right. Now moving to 33. This is the food trucks. Or
No,
no.
this
Sorry,
isn't the
This
food.
is the
Fast food.
Can't wait
Fast
to get
food.
to the food.
fast
trucks.
food.
Okay. I swear we did this last time.
And we couldn't have voted fast food last time.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I got,
We were waiting for more information from the planning board.
okay.
So what do people feel?
I support this.
Me too.
Hmm?
Do you support this?
Okay. I think we're ready for a vote.
Motion to recommend affirmative action on Article 33.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote.
Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Mr. Dane?
Aye.
Ms. Hartman?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
And myself, Ms. Ackerman, aye.
All right. Now we're to the food trucks, 34.
I support this as well because I want Matt to make some money.
You know, at the public hearing, I got up and I talked about how I was planning to make a fortune off of
In
these
your-
food
in your
trucks, I put it in my
right.
driveway.
Yeah.
I do believe, just to riff on that this article does require some modifications. And I would, in particular, for the residential districts, I would recommend limiting the occurrence from 52 occurrences per year to, let's say, 2. And to perhaps make it, non-commercial, because it's a business enterprise that's being conducted in a residential district.
So
But if you
But 2 is
realize
too-
that if you vote on this, it'll be a conflict of interest for you to put a food truck in your driveway.
Well, I know. Well, I wasn't saying
That's
it
good.
in order to encourage this. So
I think
my feeling is that I would like to see an amended article before I,
So you want to
For it.
report at town meeting?
I would prefer to report at town meeting. That's my view.
And the amendment you would like to see would be
That's one.
address exact that. Okay, that's one of
And
them.
the part that's what I wanted to see addressed in it was have whatever needs a special permit, which under this bylaw is required to have one in a public way, not be a function that is assigned to the select board. Again, with my principle.
Well, except for by authority, we control the public way. I mean, that's why.
Well,
That's the stuff we approve. We approve poll petitions. We
no, I
approve
don't, but I don't
signs.
think,
We
I
approve.
don't think we have to.
I think
I
that
think
if
that's
you look at the
state
town
law.
charter, that's what we do.
Or the state law.
And yeah, that's what we do, unfortunately. Now,
And
I think
then
it is
said if we're-
it's
if we're going to have to do it, I think there have to be some criteria or standards.
oh,
or
well, we're going to have
process.
to develop them. I mean,
Well, the
won't
bylaw-
be me. But the
They-
select board will have to have them. And the thing is that, and staff would probably help. In fact, I would ask the planning department to help. But I would say as well, because you don't need such a permit to do it on your own property, that's going to encourage these trucks to be there anyway. The people are not going to want to go through this process. It's going to be a natural kind of limit.
Oh, you mean because we could make it so difficult for you?
Well,
But I mean,
it's
the-
just
if-
naturally difficult.
If bylaw, if procedures and standards are going to be developed by the town, by us or by the town departments, the bylaw has to say special permit issued by the select board, subject to rules and regulations to be promulgated by the select board or by the whatever. Because you don't automatically have the right to just make rules and regulations because you have the responsibility to enforce something.
Well, if you look at the Warren article, right, it talks about, first of all, that the Board of Health, right, has to allow this thing, right? And that their criteria is already probably going to take us pretty far, right? So I was just trying to get down to the specific language.
I don't see why it can't be assigned.
So there's the retail food code, right? That is also controlling these things.
But if they want to have one in a public way, they have to come to the select board for a special
I feel
permit.
like that's our job. That's our job.
So it seems like we're going to report at town meeting for this article and hopefully there'll be some amendments by then.
That's would be my preference. Don't want to impose that on people, but
I'm ready to vote on it as it is.
Mary, you want to what?
she's ready to vote.
I'm ready to vote.
How about you, Linda?
I would like to wait for town meeting.
Okay, I think we have 3 of us.
Okay, let's wait for
So-
town meeting.
So the amendment we want was to limit the days on a resident.
Right.
zone.
And if possible, whether or not it's a commercial, enterprise, right? Whether it's sold to the public. You would rather not make it
Got it.
available to the public. the
Okay.
Public.
And I
Now,
guess,
how are we
private
going to get that how are we going to
Planning
get that
board.
message to the planning board?
Well, there's one little wrinkle here.
Well, I mean, I think I kind of gave them some feedback at the public hearing.
I think we need to tell them again.
Okay.
But it was one of the one of the most likely locations for food trucks that would be on private property were Verrill Farm, and Steve Verrill was there.
Yeah, he was very much in
And
favor.
it's on agricultural land, but it is probably zoned residential because agriculture is permitted in a residential
Well,
zone.
I would say unless there's a non-conforming commercial use, right? I mean, the legal non-conforming commercial, I think that's fine.
Okay. But
Okay, that would be so the three things would be, it would be not in residential unless there's a legal non-conforming commercial use. And in if it's private
Okay.
use,
Okay, I
right?
get it, yeah.
Private residential, then it should be for private events and twice a year or 3 times. I don't know. I mean,
Okay, we're being very specific, so I really think we need to get that message to the planning, either the planning department or the planning board. And I don't see anyone. I don't see everybody
well,
on this.
actually, Carrie is making writing
Great.
notes.
Thank you.
Right. And I guess we might as well check whether another body like the zoning board could give the special permit instead of us. We might as well check if
I
we're,
don't think if it's in the public way.
I think you're right.
They control private
you're right,
property.
but,
That's what they do.
Yeah, I don't think that should be something we stop.
They,
Just-
parcels.
I mean, I hear you, Henry, but
okay, let's go to the next article.
if it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
All right. So we are now at combined business residence. This is the third and final of the zoning articles. This was all about creating more opportunities for public house or for affordable housing in.
So it's
combined business
reducing the
residence.
amount of 10 or less units from 20 to
Yes.
10.
And then once again, at this article, I had concerns about the so-called cliff at 10 units, where there was a significant increase in the affordable housing requirement. And once again, at 13 units, there'd be 3 units required just using the formula that they had. And I was proposing an alternative formula. And that would be smoother.
We don't even know if this is going to actually really incent anybody to build any more units
Well,
in Concord.
I felt
So-
like the way they were doing it was disincentive in part, and I was trying to make it simpler.
So it just.
More of an incentive.
Yeah, but we're not the planning board, so.
So it's more regulation to do less.
Well, no, there already are regulations
To
about
do
this.
nothing already, we should
No.
have more.
There already are regulations about this, and this is really tweaking them. That's what it's about.
Yeah, but we don't know if they're going to do okay, never mind. We're not sure that this is
We've
going
made
to
4
do.
tweaks. This is the 4th tweak.
But maybe that's
Go ahead.
just because it is
Yes,
the
we will.
planning board.
No,
Maybe it,
I
and we
rest
don't
my case.
understand it. Maybe it is something on which we just don't make a recommendation and leave them to sell it.
No, I think we have to make a recommendation on every article.
No, we don't.
Is that right?
No, we don't.
well, if you,
We can recommend.
it depends on if you belong to the Ruth Lauer School of Select Board membership, which is I think, and I really was swayed by her view
Yeah.
in her guidebook, which was, as a select board member, your responsibility is to make a decision.
Yeah, I
You can't
think so.
just say, I'm not in the mood today. I'll let somebody else decide. We're supposed to provide a recommendation.
Well, I would challenge that because if you can't honestly or authentically make a recommendation one way or the other, why force yourself to be? I mean,
To do your homework. I mean, that's
it's not a
Okay,
question
well,
of doing your homework. It's a
It's
question.
almost 9:30. We're not going to get into like
Okay,
philosophical
well, I want
debate.
to.
We have to do,
I think-
what do we have to do at 9:30?
I think it's odd to make a recommendation on some planning board articles and not all planning board articles. I could see you saying, I'm not going to take up any planning board articles, but to pick and choose seems a bit odd.
I
I
think
don't have, I mean, yeah,
think
this might
that-
work.
presentation
sure.
was good
Sure.
and I would like to try it. I'm in support of this article.
okay. Well, should we take a vote?
2.5 to 2.5.
Don't know where Linda's at.
She's a yes.
All right, well, I'll make a motion and we'll see what happens. Motion to recommend affirmative action for Article 35. Nobody wants to say.
So is there a second?
No.
Can I second?
No.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I
Can
mean,
you?
because of
No,
the
he's the
chair.
chair.
can you?
Yeah.
You get to vote.
Can't make a
If you can
motion.
vote, You can second.
You can't make a motion.
I made the motion.
Yeah, I know.
I will
saying-
second.
Ah,
All right, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Hey, Ms. Escobedo.
I'm going to say aye.
And Mr. Dane.
Can I pass?
Abstain.
Sure.
Abstain.
I'll abstain.
All right, Ms. Hartman.
I'll say yes. I mean, we'll see if it works. I don't
Yeah.
have a lot of faith, but we'll see. Maybe it
Mr.
will make a
Johnson.
difference.
Yes, and I will say yes because, or I, because I won't let perfection get in the way of something.
Okay, but you can still later
Might.
propose an amendment.
No, I will
Okay.
ask them whether.
Yeah. Okay, and myself, Ms. Ackerman, aye.
Okay, so we have 4-0-1.
Okay, let's
Right.
keep going.
All right.
We're doing well.
Final strokes here.
Yeah, we are.
So
37.
Article 30,
Is 36 going to be?
36, we hear is not going to be moved. Is that still the case?
That's yes.
Right, so 36 is not going to be moved. We're now to Article 37. So any thoughts on this?
I think there's a need for this. I know at the hearing, several people said this is a problem looking for a solution, but I don't think they live in my neighborhood. So I think not just for sustainability as far as moving to electric, but also I find noise as a form of pollution. So this is, I'm supportive of this article.
Any other thoughts?
Well, you're talking about the leaf
Leaf
blower?
blowers. The
Yeah,
leaf blowers
leaf
article.
blowers.
Yeah,
I mean, if you want, we can put it up on the screen so you can see it.
I know what it is. Have we already, the 36 is not going to be moved?
That's right.
Was
So then-
30, could someone remind me, was 37 using the language ban, as I recall?
It's only allowed in the periods March 15th to May 31st and September 15th to December 30th, and is prohibited at all other times. And then effective March 15th, 2025, use of gas-powered handheld leaf blowers by commercial landscapers shall be prohibited. And then in 2026, the use of gas-powered handheld leaf blowers by residents on their own property shall be prohibited. Okay, so that means that more or less we're talking about if this passed, there would be this fall and the following spring and fall, essentially, that commercial operations could use gas-powered leaf blowers, and then one more year for residential. Handheld ones. Yes, that's
Handheld.
correct. That's
Right.
correct.
Okay, so that the
So
large,
the big ones they could still use.
they can still use, or the ones in backpacks,
No.
or those.
The
No.
gas
And
powered handheld leaf blowers would not be allowed.
so if it is,
So backpacks, I don't know, is that handheld or not?
well, part of it's held by the hand and part of it isn't. I don't know. And it may depend on which hand you hold it with.
Um,
But handheld, I
Okay.
think, I don't know what the intention is, but handheld is like, I guess I thought was the one you hold in your hand like this.
So it seems like if,
it
You know-
says gas powered handheld leaf blowers.
right, I think this article needs some more thought. And this discussion illustrates that. So I think I think I would have to vote no at this time until, unless it's going to get amended to clean up a lot of these questions.
Linda, do you have feelings about this? Yeah, I see your hands raised.
Yeah.
I'm torn between the spirit, particularly since it's the handheld piece of it. I don't, so I'm torn between trying to support the spirit of us moving in this direction. But I'm having some difficulty with the lack of a broader community conversation about this.
Well,
Prior to-
We had
a
it
lot more
here.
articulate than how I heard.
We had the public
We
hearing.
did, but a lot of good questions were raised. I was originally for this, and then I heard a lot of good comments at the public hearing. And I don't think we're ready to vote this yet. I mean, not report at town meeting, I mean,
Has this come up before a town meeting?
Twice.
So this is the third time?
This is the third time.
So what? Guess I'm wondering what we're waiting for. Well, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Is there, I mean, by the way, I should say, each time it's come up, it's been in a different form.
Okay.
You know,
Yep.
they've had differences, but.
And the differences were in response to comments that they heard, you think?
No, I think it was it was because of the sort of the nature of the interest, you know,
Okay.
whether it was noise as opposed to pollution or as the primary goal.
Okay. Yep. I see this as both, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, this funny, I made a statement, you know, during the chair's remarks about just the talk I attended that Bill McKibben gave last night. And, you know, one of the more telling points there was just about the nature of our suburban livelihood is not very sustainable, you know, and that this is just evidence of it. It's not like the root of it, but it is one of those things. And when you think about that, the town is adopting for new construction a fuel-free infrastructure thing where someone can't put like natural gas stove in their house.
Right.
You know, I feel like this is, although this has a lot more holes in it because it's not like a generic thing. It's just one specific implement, but I just feel like, well, you know, it's a step, and you know, it's painful, I think, in some respects, but that's where I get back to what Bill McKibben said, which was Concord's a very comfortable place, and we need to get out of our comfort zone. So this is a little uncomfortable.
no, I agree with that,
But
but
I just feel like, you know, we gotta be bold and
do something.
take steps. So that's why at this stage,
right.
even though I think there are flaws and certainly a lot of ambiguities.
I'm just looking at some of the comments from the public hearing. What is handheld? Other types are louder, but they're not covered by this.
Right.
What will it cost the DPW? Will they have to replace?
Right. And I've heard a lot of discussion about possible amendments, but then I haven't heard anything from the petitioner about those, or I haven't heard any evidence.
Right. So we already talked about 3 or 4 other articles tonight that we wanted to see amendments on.
Right.
Like 22 and some planning board ones. So I think we should wait on this.
Well, I would say that there are differences in that while I would like to see amendments to this, and I think it'd be greatly improved. I also would like to kind of make a statement that I would be in support in general of this kind of initiative and would encourage negotiations with that in mind.
Okay.
But let's take a vote.
Okay,
And
let's
see what
take a
they
vote.
said. I don't know.
All right. So if I'm going to vote no, can I still make the motion? That doesn't make any sense. Somebody else
can because you get the vote.
All right. Okay.
5 people, so we're going to get a majority one way or another.
All right. I move that the select board recommend no action on Article 37.
Okay. Do I have a second on that motion? Anybody else want to second that motion?
No action.
Yeah. Well, could I entertain a motion of affirmative action? Then
Right? Somebody else
who will make that motion.
I move that the select board recommend affirmative action on Article 37.
Do I have a second on that one?
Second.
All right. So. roll call.
Okay, Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Mr. Dane,
No.
Ms. Hartman,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
and myself, Ms. Ackerman, no.
Okay, 3-2.
3-2. Okay.
All right. What
that
else
it?
we have?
I think
Parking
43.
meters.
Parking meter receipts.
That's
Well, I
what-
think-
Looking for
I
more
think,
detail.
I think you were going to report at town meeting and we were going to come back to you later.
That's right.
Okay.
That's
Then-
right.
Then we're done.
Yay.
Okay, do you want speakers for these or do you want to go through that or are we too
Let's
late?
assign speakers next time. It's
Okay,
late.
okay.
I
that's
will
fine.
not be here next time,
So we'll give it all to Terry.
Articles.
Speak on everything.
Oh, my God.
You can do that, Terry.
All right, we're going to give you the specialized stretch energy code and the leaf blowers and the,
Uh-huh.
School budget.
Okay,
I better cancel my trip right now, right?
all
Oh, my
right.
God.
It's getting late.
It is, we're getting silly.
So the next item is the
Committee nominations.
nominations.
Okay. Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee. We're nominating Brian Kraus of 49 Indian Type Lane for a term to expire May 31st, 2026.
Okay.
And Concord Housing Authority, we are nominating Bernice Busek of 115 Stowe Street at Peter Bulkley Terrace for a first term as a tenant member from May 1st, 2023 to May 31st, 2028.
Okay, and now to committee appointments. Motion.
Okay, Battle Road Scenic
to-
Byway Committee, move to appoint Nancy Nelson of 1695 Lowell Road for a second term from May 1st, 2023 to May 31st, 2026.
Can I add something to that appointment? Because Nancy Nelson is also now serving on the Historical Commission. And I understand that there is some sentiment for her to remain on that commission. That the reason that she may be moving over may be because she would not otherwise be reappointable to a 5-year term on the Historical Commission. So can we make this appointment subject to the APP 10 section, whatever it is, 7B, I think it is, so that she could serve on more than one committee?
Well, first of all, I don't think the Battle Road Scenic Byway Committee, Shannon, is that one of the committees even on the regular committee list?
So I actually think it may be another town's committee that we send representatives.
Yeah.
Representative.
Yeah.
So it's not a problem.
Okay, it's not an issue.
Okay,
good.
great. And move to appoint Brendan O'Neill Camisa of 30 Davis Court for a second term to the Board of Assessors from May 1st, 2023 to May 31st, 2026. And move to appoint Adrian Boardman of 110 Hillcrest Road for a second term to the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee from May 1st, 2023 to May 31st, 2026. Also Dorcas Miller of 75 White Avenue for a second term to the same committee from May 1st, 2023 to May 31st, 2026. And also Nathaniel Welch of 1141 Stowe Street for a second term from May 1st, 2023 to May 31st, 2026. All of those to the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Advisory Committee. And move to appoint Arthur Rogers of 30 Elsinore Street for a second term from May 1st, 2023 to May 31st, 2026 to the Concord Cultural Council. And move to appoint Lee Smith of 1836 Main Street for a second term from May 1st, 2023 to May 31st, 2026 to the Concord Housing Development Corporation. And finally, move to appoint Anne Marie Altman of 247 Lawsbrook Road for a second term from May 1st, 2023 to May 31st, 2026 to the Conservation Restriction Stewardship Committee.
Okay, do I have a second for that?
Second.
All right.
Okay,
We'll call vote, please.
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Mr. Dane,
Aye.
Ms. Hartman.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
And myself, Ms. Ackerman, aye.
All right, thanks very much. And so now I'd like to acknowledge 4 pieces of correspondence that are in our packet. One from the West Concord Advisory Committee, giving their support for the concept of affordable housing as described on the Junction Village site. One from Mari Weinberg about the conduct of our board meetings and And yes, thank you. And then Mark Garvey on the commuter rail quiet zone and need to protect that. And then Tanya Galis about the DEI director warrant article and some.
Should we follow up on the one about the quiet zone, about the threat to the?
I believe that Carrie is already in discussions, right?
Yeah, yes, we are.
Good. Okay, thanks.
Okay. So now we're open for public comment. So if you have a public comment, please come to the microphone, identify yourself, your name and address, and make your comment. Okay.
It's Mary Weinberg, Hillside Avenue in West Concord. This is just going to take just a minute. I timed it.
Good.
A bit of levity that ends with a reality of severity. It was the night before COVID. All seniors were about to stay sealed up in their homes for a very long, many winters COVID fright night nap. While visions of going out in public danced through their heads, the town was preparing for a huge sticker price shock ahead. When COVID had just started to wane, a new newspaper in every mailbox came. What did they see? $110 million price tag was almost in place to up their taxes at a speed of light pace. The news confused many seniors. They didn't understand how a much needed middle school had become so very grand. On design extravagance, on a project manager, a huge global company that would boast of their project range from the World Trade Center to the towers of Abu Dhabi. And from this quiet town of Concord, there rose such a sound as the middle school project took off with a fright. The town's seniors were about to enter a very dark winter's night. I'm just turned 78 and I've been here 44 years and we're entering a dark winter's night. So at town meeting, I asked for a motion, which I understood couldn't be had, that we asked our Board of Selectmen to write a letter, just a letter, we have a senator and we have 2 representatives, to just do research on the Hill of a tax stabilization plan. Maine has it, Oregon has it, Washington started it, and David, speaking outside, he said he mentioned it quickly. He's done some research. He said New York, New Jersey, and even Florida has it. This would be for the whole state. It has to come from the Hill. That takes time. But somebody's got to start the ball rolling. And I thought, well, we fired the first shot at the North Bridge. Why don't we be the ones to start this? This is referred to in Maine as the Homestead Act. It will be, and some of you younger people, when you reach 65, you'll know that your taxes will be capped. I found out about this just because of the middle school from my friends in Maine. If I had known about it, I probably would have been here 20 years ago when I was fighting for the West Concord Depot. I probably would have started pushing for this. But better late than never. I might never see it, but I think it would be fantastic. We can't go back. We already have the debt of the middle school. But if we had, I didn't even know about the residential plan. I didn't even know about that. And that was enacted when I moved here in 79. But better late than never. It's for the next people coming in because we're losing the town very quickly. And 40 years ago, they were talking about the same thing. How are we going to stop the small houses being torn down? How are we going to do it? We're never going to be able to stop that. But we can put things into motion that will help. We really don't have a diverse town, and we're losing the little diversity we have, the older people. David said that he will connect with me and do some research on this. But I ask you, your select people, and our town manager meets with other town managers, the group, you can write a letter. You'd have to vote on it, maybe make a proclamation and send it up. So because it's not, the Hugh Cargill Trust is wonderful. It's very good. That's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
And also mortgaging off your house, like saying, 4%, that's not what I'm talking about. There are so many people like me. And if I'm ever down to $278,000 of my total assets, and I'm 78, and my doctors say I'm going to live long, I'm going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
So thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
Good night.
Under public comment? Yes, come on up.
Marianne Marr, 45 Bruce Road. So I just want to talk about the leaf blower thing. I'm disappointed how 3 of you voted because I don't feel like anybody has done any research, including the gentleman that did the article. Your tick and mosquito treatments, that's done with a gas-powered leaf blower. They won't be able to do those treatments for customers or if needed in the town if we have another West Nile outbreak. The financial burden, nobody took the time to do the research, called up who the town would be buying their stuff from. One of their gas leaf blowers is $1,600. Each extra battery is $999.99 before tax. And yes, Sven, the gentleman who started the article, said yes, backpacks would not be allowed. He also agreed to making amendments, which he has not passed on to you guys, and that's been several weeks. The DPW flat out said to his face, my face, and in front of other people that they will not be able to take care of the town if they have to switch to electric because the technology's not there. They even talked about, he talked about exempting commercial properties, and that would not be fair to the average homeowner just because you have, he's willing supposedly to do 1.5 acres or less. That it can't yet be done with a battery operated. It's literally just facts. You could call anybody at anyone who sells gas or electric as cold call, and they'll tell you cannot be done yet. It's not that people don't want to switch. There's nothing comparable. So when it's comparable, everyone's ready to switch. How are we going to clean up the fertilizer, whether you're a resident or a vendor taking care of your property? The fertilizer is going to be in the streets. They're not going to move with an electric one. How are we going to get the grass clippings? So now we're making the streets messy. Tree companies, when they are done cutting the tree, they've got the wood chips. How many? I'd have to carry 10 batteries. And if you think that the landscapers are going to actually recycle them, the damage caused by batteries is far worse than gas on any day. So, and seasonal doesn't help because tick and mosquito and fertilizer, that happens the entire year. And anybody that's a reputable person, whether it be your neighbor or a commercial, they respect the normal hours. So if neighbors would just start talking to neighbors and say, hey, can you do this before? I like to be outside at this time. I know for my neighbors, I've changed a lot of my lifestyle at home and with no problem. So I think we need to work on communicating with our neighbors and then work on the technology when it's there. How is Concord Green possibly going to clean up that property? I mean, that would be, I can't even imagine how many batteries that would take in one day. So that's all. I just ask that, when people are voting and telling people, because people look to you guys for advice because they don't do the research. I just feel that the research wasn't done. Again, obviously, I don't want to spend money on fuel. If it was there, I'd do it. It's not there. And he is including the backpack one. And I'm not going to carry. It's just not even possible. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Other public comment. I see somebody online. Yes, is that Janet Rothrock? Good.
Yes, hi. Well, thank you very much. I did submit this letter, so I'm surprised it didn't show up. I submitted it to the, the select board, whatever the general select board address is. So.
Was it by Friday at noon?
Yeah, it was several days ago. I did it the same day I submitted a letter to the editor, and they told me like yesterday or the day before that the letter was in the bridge. Will come out on Friday. Anyway, I did it several days ago.
Okay.
But I have all your addresses, and I'll probably just send the next letter if I write one, I'll send it to your personal addresses because apparently I can't figure out how to do the town's thing. Anyway.
Can you read it?
Yes, I will read it. The Public Ceremonies and Celebrations Committee has new criteria to determine what groups can march in the Patriots' Day Parade. Where did these criteria come from? They disallow suitable civic groups and all but invite unsuitable groups. They are arbitrary, internally inconsistent, and give the PCCC no latitude for discretion. The committee's website says the theme and purpose of the Patriots' Day Parade is to commemorate the events that took place in Concord on April 19, 1775, the beginning of the war in which former British subjects fought and died to give us the gift of freedom and independence we enjoy today. The PCCC interprets this arbitrarily by permitting only marching bands, reenactors of various wars, service and youth organizations, Concord boards and committees, etc. They could have interpreted the criteria to allow participation by groups that exemplify the freedom and independence we enjoy today, such as Concord Can, the Sunshine Movement, Reclaim Our Democracy, 350.org, and Concord Indivisible, which have all marched in the past, as well as Concord for Ukraine, who applied this year and was rejected. The criteria are internally inconsistent. Why are the Girl Scouts, who have nothing to do with the events of 1775, allowed to march? Similarly, the Concord Municipal Light Plan is permitted to march, but we weren't even using electricity in 1775. These groups should march because they exemplify civic engagement. Full disclosure, I was a Girl Scout and a Girl Scout leader for 18 girl years, and my girls marched in the Patriots' Day Parade. So I'm a big supporter of, if they want to march in the parade, they should be able to do it. The PCCC should have a provision allowing it to judge the merits of groups that are not explicitly named in the criteria, because it is impossible to set up a criterion for every possible group that might apply. For example, if the PCCC is trying to prevent white nationalist groups from participating, there is nothing in the criteria that accomplishes that. In fact, criterion 11, and they're all in caps. When you see the letter, you'll see everything's in caps. I don't know why. Organized reenactor units representing the American Revolution and Civil War and participation in World War I and World War II, etc. That seems to invite Confederate flags. The Patriots' Day Parade belongs to each of us. It is a celebration of the fruits of freedom, hard fought in 1775 and throughout the Revolution. We express that freedom in our civic organizations and our civic discourse that knit together our social fabric. Concord Can exemplifies the civic discourse that the events of 1775 made possible. The patriots of 1775 would be appalled at the exclusion of Concord Can, which was excluded this year. The PCCC allowed cursory public comment after the current criteria were written, but it should start anew and develop more inclusive criteria that protect our parade in a series of open meetings with real public input. And I have a couple of observations on the PCCC. I attended several of their meetings. They have an even number on the committee, so you get ties. That seems to be a poor process, or poor way to set it up. The votes I have observed are either unanimous or split by gender, with the men voting to exclude and the women voting to include if it is split. The discussions are short and not very nuanced. The men tend to argue, and this is almost verbatim, we have these principles, we need to adhere to them regardless of our sympathies for the group asking to march. So the committee makes no reference back to discussions when they made the criteria. It is as though the committee received the criteria from outside themselves and feel that it cannot think critically about them, and that no one else may think critically about them. Henry Dane, the select board liaison, wrote a proclamation last year in support of Concord for Ukraine, who could not apply to march in the parade because it was too late. It was past the deadline. Although he was present at he's been present at 2 of the 3 meetings I attended, he never spoke up to advocate for Concord for Ukraine when it applied 2 weeks ago, even though the people there made direct reference to his proclamation. They read it and his signature. Concord for Ukraine was also rejected. During the 3 meetings I attended, the public was given 2 minutes per person to comment. Sometimes the total public comment was capped at 10 minutes. The timing screen was pointed at the timekeeper, but not at the speaker. It's kind of an odd committee. It's very inhospitable, I think. And I think you should do something about it because the 250 celebration's coming up. And if this is the kind of criteria, these sort of criteria, and by the way, there are 15 of them. My husband pointed out Moses only got 10. So I think something needs to be done about this so that it's not a prelude to, what happens at the 250 celebration. We should invite the groups that are suitable and disallow the groups that are unsuitable.
Thanks for your comment. All right. Do we have any other public comment? I thought I saw one in the room, so let's go ahead.
I don't have that.
Yeah.
Janet.
Janet, we don't have your letter. So if you could send it along and copy Shannon McAndrew, please.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. I will attempt to
send it to the Concord Bridge or to us?
Both. She said both.
Okay.
I didn't mean the journal. I'm sorry. It's bad habit. It's the bridge. I sent it to the bridge. Thank you.
And-
Bye.
Go ahead.
Mark Howell, 668 Neck Hill Road. A couple of things that you discussed earlier in the meeting on the hazard mitigation plan, which I think is definitely good to be getting regularly updated. I wondered, flooding is a high risk scenario according to the plan and a serious risk scenario. And dam removal is alluded to in the plan, but it's unclear whether there's a linkage between that and the planning that's going on for Warner's Pond possible dam removal or not. So it'd be nice to see that going together. And that also goes to the to this Community Preservation Act funding. Yeah, so it might be.
I noted it, but I didn't want to drag that into.
Yeah, I mean, that might be a comment for staff to just pull that together, and because it seems like one of the things we should be acting on. I noticed in there that most of the dams are in fact not municipal, but that one happens to be. Also
That
on
dam is recently built.
recently rebuilt, of
10
course.
10 years ago.
Right. But the real question there is, it was rebuilt in whatever for standards were appropriate in 2017. And the question is, given the high risk of climate driven weather events and flooding, what's the better thing to do right now? Try to continue to maintain the dam, remove the dam, or possibly engineer something that might be effective for flood mitigation as a hazard mitigation element in here. So I would like to see that work, and maybe instead of trying to digest a whole 135 pages, maybe we talk about the specific projects and initiatives that are coming underneath that would be helpful in the future. Likewise, I saw the board struggling with Article 22, and I also attended the talk that the chair alluded to with Bill McKibben, and I thought he was quite clear about the fact that what's really important for the world on climate is to get going on the big things. And I think the spirit of the recommendation for a solar task force is to recognize that we're not making progress towards goals that we had previously set for ourselves for 2030 solar production in town, and that progress needs to be made. I would also observe that some of the previous task forces that have been seated have also resulted as a result of negotiation and collaboration around how to get this. One idea that I had was with the Climate Action Committee recently reconstituted out of two other boards with a lot of people on it. I'm wondering whether the petitioner might be interested in any way, shape, or form in having that the work that's proposed under Article 22 be adopted by that committee, which is a standing committee, and is charged with overseeing it anyway, maybe in a subcommittee format or something like that, and get going on the siting and the other work. We have the skills, and that would be an approach that I would take with a lot of things, which is let's try and give the work to standing committees whenever possible. It's possible that there might be room for an opportunity for something like that to be negotiated ahead of town meeting, in which case we would expect no motion. I think it's also important, just as for the minutes, when the select board expects no motion, to just say no motion, not, I'll talk to Shannon about that later. But those are just a couple of ideas that I wanted to put out there. Thanks very much.
Thank you. We're back to the Zoom. Let me see. Janet, you have made your comment, correct? So let's move next to, yeah. Go ahead.
Hi, Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green. I like to echo Janet and Mark. I urge you to facilitate in whatever way is possible the solar committee citizen petition. That's something that we have to do. And we have volunteer labor and knowledge out the wazoo in this town. It's magnificent. Much better in my experience than some of the consultants that we have spent money to hire. Let's leverage our own skills and do this together.
Thank you.
So please vote favorably on it.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, and I realize I skipped over liaison reports, but I think that's appropriate.
okay. Yep.
So I would say let's adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.